about knife crime epidemic in this country, and we saw, and Sky News has been reporting online, some images circulating on social media of people, you know, with very large knives in Southend this week, having some kind of a fight or a standoff, as it were, and arrests have been made for that as well. So this is not an isolated incident, and there is a concern around knife crime, and there's a concern around the ability to get especially very large kind of machete-type knives as well, and the amount of, we're seeing that kind of increase on the streets of cities as well. So the conversation really does need to be had. Mark, great stuff. Thanks so much. Now, funeral proceedings are being held for Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Haniyeh was assassinated yesterday during a visit to the city. Iran has vowed revenge for the killing. And last night, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will exact a heavy price from any aggression in the wake of the killing. Our international correspondent John Spark has more for us.
With a broad smile and a fulsome handshake, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh greets officials in the Iranian parliament, here posing for pictures at the inauguration of the country's new president, one of the last things he would ever do. In the early hours, the residence of Ismail Haniyeh was hit, said the newsreader. The incident is under investigation. But it didn't take long to point the finger. Israel blamed immediately by the Iranian government and these protesters in Tehran. A protege of the organization's founder, Sheikh Yassin, Haniyeh became the leader of Hamas in 2006 and tried to push it in a political direction. Yet he was committed to armed struggle. Designated a terrorist by the Americans in 2018, the International Criminal Court also sought a warrant for his arrest. But many saw him as pragmatic, even moderate, as he tried to negotiate a ceasefire with Israel. In the West Bank, hundreds of Palestinians took to the streets in a series of noisy protests, here hoisting the green flag of Hamas. In Hebron, they held Haniyeh's picture aloft before the skirmishes began with Israeli forces. Politicians said the assassination would serve to energize the Palestinian cause. In Gaza, the news of Haniyeh's demise was greeted with dismay. Our team traveling to the place where the 62-year-old grew up, the Shati refugee camp near Gaza City. There's not much left of the neighborhood now, but those who remain proclaimed him a man of the people.
Everyone loved him because he was so humble with everyone, young and old, the father of good deeds and of forgiveness.
He was betrayed. They couldn't take him out in Gaza where he'd lived for years and years, and they never got him. They took him out when he was in a foreign country.
For the family members of the Israeli hostages seen gathering here in Jerusalem, it is an event of undeniable significance. The Israelis, it seems, have eliminated their principal counterpart when hopes of a deal were arising. Yet many see no other way. Isn't there a contradiction here, the Israeli government both trying to destroy Hamas and negotiate with them through intermediaries at the same time?
This is a good question. Terror organizations like Hamas, like Al-Qaeda, they don't really care like we care about people, about the circumstances, about real life. It doesn't have the same way of thinking like you and I. And if you don't push it, they see it as a weakness.
Hamas has recovered from similar setbacks. The death of Haniyeh will not destroy it, but it may shatter the balance in the region. The risk of escalation has never been so great. John Sparks, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Well, our Sky's special correspondent, Alex Crawford, joining us now live from Beirut. And Alex, a lot going on, of course, in Beirut itself, but also eyes this morning itself on the funeral in Tehran.
Yeah, there's going to be a couple of funerals today, key funerals, because not only is there the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh, the chief negotiator of Hamas, the man that many people in this region were looking towards to actually try and broker a deal with Israel for the future of Gaza and Palestine, but also there's the funeral for the commander, the Hezbollah commander, a senior Hezbollah commander, deputy leader to the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. So there's going to be a focus on two countries today, Lebanon and Iran. Certainly thousands of people are already turning out to the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh. He was a much revered figure amongst the Axis of Resistance, as it's called, the group of countries headed by Iran, but also backed up by militant groups in Lebanon, in Syria and Iraq. And there have already been commemorations from him here in Beirut, for instance. But all the world's eyes really are pointing to what is going to happen next, because the Iranian supreme leader, who's already led the prayers for Ismail Haniyeh, has already said that he feels duty-bound to take revenge in retaliation for the death of Ismail Haniyeh, because he was a guest of Tehran and in Iran itself. Today in Beirut, we're likely to see probably not as large crowds, but of a significant turnout for the funeral of the key commander here, who was a Hezbollah commander who was killed here in Beirut. And we're also expecting a speech, a remote speech, by the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. And again, his words will be dissected and investigated and looked at very closely to get some sort of indication about where he's going to lead his loyalists, and everyone very fearful that there may well be some sort of coordinated attack from these militant groups forming part of the Axis of Resistance. We've already had the funerals of civilians, 2 children who were killed in the same apparently targeted blast against this Hezbollah commander, and that's already drawn a big crowd yesterday. Have a look at our report and see the reactions of the people here on the ground.
Emergency workers are still clearing the rubble from the Israeli strike in the heart of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Bedrooms have been exposed, and personal belongings are now half buried under stones and debris. Almost hidden amongst the wreckage, you can just about make out a child's Pikachu bear. The Lebanese fighting group Hezbollah, which is closely allied with Iran, confirmed that their senior commander, Fouad Shukr, was in the building. Military sources told us it took rescue workers a night and a day to locate the body of the fighter, who was the Hezbollah leader's right-hand man, his deputy.
This is not going to calm things, right in a densely populated civilian area as well as a Hezbollah stronghold.
Local Hezbollah leaders are furious and immediately vowed revenge.
Israel will be punished.
Okay, and how is this going to lead to a regional war?
It will be punished soon.
And is this going to lead to a regional war? Because that's what everyone is worried about.
You should be wait, just wait.
The attack on the Lebanese capital, along with another strike 12 hours later in the Iranian capital, Tehran, is being seen as incendiary, and Lebanese politicians are viewing it as an aggressive breach of sovereignty.
I think the international community has been too patient with Israel. And within Israel, people know that they need to stop the fighting and to stop the killing. And we call on them to do this now and not spend more effort and money and killing as a waste. It's a waste.
Do you worry for Lebanon now?
I worry for Lebanon. I worry for the Arab world. I worry for all of the region. I worry about an international conflict.
But along with the commander, the community of Dahiya came together in its hundreds to mourn a brother and sister also killed in the Israeli attack. Their brother is in a critical condition in hospital. Many of those present were reduced to tears. 2 women were also killed. Lebanon's health ministry said there were more than 70 wounded. And the twin assassinations appears to have only strengthened the resolve amongst the Hezbollah faithful. Hezbollah and Hamas are inextricably linked, and in the winding lanes of one of Beirut's refugee camps, they were honouring the memory of the Hamas chief negotiator. The man talking in front of the poster of Ismail Haniyeh was a close friend of his and fellow member of the Hamas political leadership team.
We're a resistance movement that's not going away, and we have the right to a strong retaliation. But I can't say, from my political position, exactly how or on what level this retaliation will be. We'll find out in the coming days.
Hezbollah's released another chilling video showing what they claim is surveillance detail of key Israeli sites, including the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv, apparently an indication of the group's potential targets. The grieving masses in Beirut are simmering with a yearning to avenge those killed. Hamas and Hezbollah are certainly expected to respond. The key question is, what will Iran do, and how strong will any retaliation be? This region is at its most precarious point since the start of the war in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
We're going to have lots more from the Middle East throughout the day here, both from John Sparks, Alex Crawford, and a number of guests. We'll be joined by a former ICC prosecutor as well later on in the show. But now time for all of the day's other news. Leah's got that for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. We'll start with news from the Bank of England, who are expected to cut interest rates when it meets today. Research by news agency Reuters suggests the interest rate will be cut to 5%, down from the current 5.25. We'll bring you the bank's decision live on Sky News when they announce it at midday. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, will meet with the BBC's boss, Tim Davie, today after Hugh Edwards admitted to possessing indecent images of children. Yesterday, the broadcaster admitted it was aware the former newsreader was arrested in November but continued to employ him until April. Mr. Edwards has pleaded guilty to having 41 indecent photographs of children. 3 suspects accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks have reached a plea deal with prosecutors. The suspects, including the alleged mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, have been held at a US Navy base in Cuba for more than 2 decades. Well, from Washington, Sky's US correspondent James Matthews has more.
There are 3 individuals on Guantanamo who were behind the 9/11 attacks, and they include the man seen as the architect-in-chief. He's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He used to be al-Qaeda's propaganda chief, and he's said to be the man who went to Osama bin Laden with the idea of hijacking commercial airliners and flying them into buildings. He's then accused of having trained and directed the hijackers involved. The trio have been in US custody for 20 years. Their cases have been mired in legal argument around their time in CIA prisons and whether or not torture has undermined the evidence gathered against them. Full details of the plea agreement aren't being made public as of yet, but it's understood that the 3 being spared the death penalty is part of it. They're expected to make their plea in the coming days, but they won't be sentenced until later next year for the terrorist atrocity that killed nearly 3,000 people.
Well, staying with the US, Donald Trump has been criticised over comments he made questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris. Speaking at a convention hosted by the National Association of Black Journalists, Mr. Trump questioned the vice president and whether she was black.
I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
While speaking at a rally in Houston last night, the vice president had this reaction to the former president's remarks.
Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has asked the country's High Court to review Sunday's election after the opposition disputed his claim of victory. But critics say the review won't be fair because the court is too close to the government. Well, following the declaration, violent protests broke out, leaving 11 people dead. The main opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, disputes the results and claims he won more than 70% of the votes.
Yeah, thank you. Now, a leading investigator into maternity scandals across the UK says she's appalled by the treatment of families who had negative experiences at a Welsh hospital's maternity unit. It's been 7 months since a review into maternity services at Swansea Bay took place, but families say they continue to be ignored. Our correspondent, Siobhan Freeman-Powell, has this report.
Ready? Come on then, good boy.
Complications during birth means Gethin now requires 24-hour care.
Come on, Gethin, ready?
And his family say 5 years on, their pursuit for the truth has been fruitless. An independent review into the hospital that delivered Gethin was established late last year, but his family say they've yet to be included.
Families are the victims, and there is no getting away from the fact that without their voice, you're only hearing half a story. You can read notes, you can read reports, and you can speak to doctors. Why on earth would you not speak to families direct?
Over the past 5 years, the maternity unit at Singleton Hospital in Swansea has come under scrutiny in a number of internal and external reviews. The UK's leading investigator into maternity scandals says the latest review is not fit for purpose and should be scrapped altogether.
I'm appalled and shocked that a part of the NHS can think that it's okay to do unto harmed families, to not engage with them from day one. This is not about fixing or sticking back together something that is already broken. A new review with families at the very heart of it from its inception.
Monster cars.
Yeah. Sky News has spoken to 6 families cared for by the Trust, each raising concerns about their treatment and those responsible for reviewing it.
Green. Green, you clever boy.
Catherine says she's lucky to be alive after complications caused her and her son to contract sepsis. Signs of her physical scars are fading, but the emotional trauma runs much deeper.
When I was in the hospital in these times, I always asked questions. I was never really given straight answers. There was one surgeon that had actually come and he'd explained that there are complications in caesareans when you are carrying extra weight. And obviously then I blamed myself for it all because of that reason, but I later found out that that was just an excuse.
Swansea Bay Health Board says they are fully committed to improving its maternity and neonatal services, acknowledging there is more to be done. The interim chair of the review says, "We are sorry that there have been delays. There is now a determination to move forward, and the website will be launching during the week commencing the 12th of August, making communications much easier between the review and families."
You want to put a bye-bye seat back?
But some of those directly affected say they find it hard to trust a review into their experiences when their stories aren't currently being heard. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Swansea.
Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show this morning. Will the Bank of England cut or hold interest rates when they meet later today? Experts are divided but leaning marginally towards expecting a cut. We'll talk to an economist next. We'll find out how blood cancer patients will now be able to treat themselves at home thanks to a new drug available on the NHS. And could the Sycamore Gap tree live on? Experts find more shoots around the stump of the illegally felled tree. We'll discuss.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent and I'm based here in Beijing.
We help you understand the world with us. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Lots more still to come. We'll be discussing the Bank of England's meeting, which, of course, taking place this morning, and the decision due out midday. Might they cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years? We will discuss with an expert in a moment. But first, a reminder of all the top stories.
Thanks, Wilfred. A 17-year-old has been charged with murder and attempted murder after a mass stabbing in Southport. Over 100 people were arrested last night in riots following the Southport attack. Elsewhere, Iran's Ayatollah led prayers at the funeral for Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh after vowing revenge over his death. The country is in mourning for the 62-year-old, who's the most senior commander to be killed since the October 7th attacks. And the Bank of England is expected to make its interest rate decision when they meet later today. Rates have been held at 5.25%, 7 times in a row. And an investigator into maternity scandal says the treatment of families failed by a Welsh hospital's maternity unit is appalling.
Right, let's talk about that Bank of England meeting. Of course, they are making their decision today, and they'll announce it at midday. The market implied probabilities do suggest a rate cut, though it's a close balance and pretty much on a knife edge. Let's discuss all of this with Stephen Millard, the Deputy Director of the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. Thanks so much for joining us on this, Stephen. So just before we get your take on it, what's happened in terms, when we talk about these market-implied probabilities, obviously we're talking about people in the city basically making bets on what is and isn't going to happen. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, it was quite clear that they didn't expect a rate cut, and now all of a sudden, marginally, they do expect a rate cut. What's happened in between?
I'm not exactly sure, to be quite frank. I think maybe they've listened to, they've looked at the data, they've tried to imagine what the Bank of England's forecast might be for the next couple of years. And they've come to the conclusion that, inflation is under control and that gives the MPC the scope to cut rates.
But at the margin, you don't think that they will?
Well, I don't think they will. I think that we still need to see a little bit more evidence that inflation is completely under control. I think wage inflation is still a little bit higher than the MPC would like. I think core inflation, that's inflation without excluding food and energy prices, I think that's still higher than the MPC would actually like. So I think if I was them, I would like to see another couple of months of data just making absolutely clear that they had those bits of inflation under control.
In terms of the other changes in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, a new government's in place and they've announced a couple of policies. One of them, which I discussed briefly with Lord Hammond yesterday, is obviously increasing public sector pay. Is that a factor significant enough that the Bank of England will be seeing it as new information to take account of, or not really?
The question there is what the bank were originally assuming about public sector pay. I mean, my gut feeling is that they won't see it as particularly new information, but the important thing really is the extent to which higher public sector pay translates into higher private sector pay. I think that's much more relevant to inflation, and it is private sector pay that the bank will definitely be looking at in the coming months.
In terms of the options on the table for the Bank of England, if they don't cut interest rates today, I mean, clearly they're not going to hike them today, and they keep them on hold where they are, would you then expect a rate cut in the next meeting? I.e., is this now a moment in time when it's a question of when, not if?
Yeah, it's definitely a question of when, not if. They will have another couple of bits of data. In particular, they'll have the GDP numbers for Q2. They'll have another couple of months of wage inflation data and CPI inflation data. They'll be looking more at core inflation rather than the headline rate. But if those bits of data were to move in the right direction, then I could see them cutting rates at the next meeting. If, on the other hand, core inflation, wage inflation remain high, then we might have to wait until November.
And if we do see a cut, whether it's today or the next month or two, how's that likely to filter through both to the economy as a whole, but also to people at home?
Well, the people most affected will be those with flexible mortgages, so that either on floating rate or on tracker mortgages will see a pretty much immediate fall in their mortgage payments, and obviously that'll be very welcome. We could then gradually see that cut in rates spilling into other interest rates. Savers will probably see their rates come down just a little bit, but credit card borrowers, they'll see their rates come down. It'll be cheaper to borrow on a credit card. And eventually, possibly, we might see some feed through into rents as well, where landlords have got mortgages. If their mortgages come down, then they might pass some of that on to renters.
And what's your assessment overall of the state of the economy at the moment? In general, we've had a lot of discussion of it, both leading into the election and indeed afterwards. How is the UK economy?
I mean, in one sense, the UK economy is doing pretty well at the minute. Output is growing. Q1 and Q2 were quite strong. The unemployment rate of 4.5% is still, relatively low. Inflation is bang on target. So in that sense, the economy is doing really well. But there are some real underlying structural problems. In particular, productivity growth has been very low in the UK for a long time. We see no clear sign that that's going to reverse anytime soon. And of course, as emphasised on Monday, the public finances facing problems at the minute, with a clear need for increased public spending at a time when taxes are already as high as a percentage of GDP as they've been since the war. And given the current fiscal rules in place, there's no real scope to increase borrowing either.
Stephen Miller, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, new research has found that teens who have a problematic relationship with their smartphones are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression and insomnia. Our technology correspondent, Arti Natchapan, has more on this. I was going to say, I'm not sure it would apply just to teens, and I'm not sure we need hard research to make that conclusion, but talk us through what you're focused on.
Yeah, it's a good point that you made. I don't think it is specific to teens, but I think the focus on teens is particularly because they're at a developmental stage and more affected. But the research is based on two different studies. It looks at younger teens and older teens, and it looks at problematic behaviours. This is a level below addiction. There is no such thing clinically defined as a smartphone addiction just yet, but researchers do think that it could be down the line. And so this is things like struggling to manage the amount of time you spend, feeling panicked when you're away from your phone. And teenagers who had this kind of relationship with their phone were twice as likely to say they had anxiety symptoms and more likely to say they were depressed or suffered from insomnia. And so the research looked at effective strategies to limit that, and that included things like putting the phone in another room at bedtime or turning off notifications. Interestingly, things like turning it to grayscale or trying to lock it in a box didn't actually work. But I think what this says is, like you said, probably not that much of a surprise in terms of the impact that smartphones have on us, but it's about that differentiation between screen time and then having an unhealthy relationship with your phone. Because interestingly, some teenagers had the same amount of screen time but didn't have what you'd say is a problematic relationship.
What does turning it to grayscale mean?
So that means turning off the colour on your phone, so making it less stimulating, so making it look like an old-fashioned movie, essentially, so it looks boring to you.
I think that sounds rather appealing.
Maybe it would make your phone use worse.
Maybe I'll read it even more. Very, very interesting on that. I mean, it's funny you said there that it's not yet a clinical addiction thing. I don't know what the definition is required to get to that point, but we could also say a lot of us are addicted to screen time, aren't we? I mean, do we need a clinical definition for that? What would it take for the research to be definitive enough to get to that point?
So a lot of us are very dependent on our screen time, and, you know, we can't really put the genie back in the bottle at this point. We have to live with phones, obviously. But when it comes to an addiction, it involves certain things, like it needs clinical involvement to help overcome. It leads to a direct harm. And so it's essentially a level more extreme than some of the problematic behaviours that they've identified. But that's not to say there aren't addictive behaviours that have been identified relating to phones. But when it comes to things like a gambling disorder, those are more recognised. But with smartphones, researchers have said that we're maybe a few years away from having enough evidence to be able to say that it's an addiction.
Very, very interesting. This black and white approach I've got to try in the break. Artie, thank you. So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll be discussing the latest for Team GB at the Olympics. A great day yesterday, and what's ahead today. We'll also find out how blood cancer patients will now be able to treat themselves at home thanks to a new drug on the NHS.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me!
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
back to the Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, we'll hear about a new tablet being prescribed by the NHS for treating blood cancer. But first, let's take a look at the latest action from the Olympics. It's day 6 of the Olympics, with possible medals for Team GB up for grabs in both rowing and swimming. They'll be hoping to keep up the momentum from a successful day yesterday when 5 medals were picked up by Team GB across the Games. Let's have a look at how the table's looking overall. Well, China currently top with 9 golds, closely followed by France and Japan, who both have 8. Success in the pool yesterday for France was quite exciting. After yesterday's haul, Team GB are currently 5th with 6 golds. And our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, has all the details for us.
What a difference a day makes, apparently. Now safe to take the plunge, after previously being told the Seine was too contaminated for the triathlon. In the women's race, Beth Potter led the British bid and won a battle for bronze. Then it was Alex Yee's turn. The men's event postponed for a day after bacteria levels were too high. The sun may be a bigger concern today, but sweltering through from 10 seconds behind with more than 200 metres to go, Yee upgraded Tokyo silver for Paris gold.
After all the delays and doubts whether it would even be safe to swim in the Seine, Beth Potter and Alex Yee were clearly unaffected by all that disruption.
With about 3k to go, my legs started to come back to me, and I thought I'd just give myself one more chance and give myself one more go.
How did you feel being told it was too dangerous to be able to even train in, then to even race yesterday, and then suddenly being told, oh, actually, it's fine now? Did you have some trepidation getting into the water?
I think because of the way we know how the river works, once we saw the rain, a few days ago, we had anticipated that, there would be, a rise in the bad water quality, and we understood that.
So how did you feel about getting in the water? The story the world's been talking about, being polluted, contaminated, us being made to fear if you get in there, you're going to get ill. How did you feel getting in it?
It was good to kind of get a feel for the water just before we dived in this morning, and yeah, it wasn't so bad. You just had to kind of play it smart.
There was also a tight, thrilling finish at the rowing lake. The lead only gained with the final strokes, as the women's sculls crew of Lauren Henry, Hannah Scott, Lola Anderson and Georgina Brayshaw took gold. And there was silver across at Place de la Concorde for BMX freestyler Kieran Riley. While in the diving, there was bronze for Andrea Spendolini Sirius and Lois Tolson in the women's 10-metre synchro. Day 5 producing 5 more medals. Team GB's haul is up to 17, their best ever start to an Olympics. Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Well, there's lots more potential for medals for Team GB in the rowing and the swimming today. Our Rachel Venables is at Fulham Reach Boat Club for us this morning. Rachel, I guess you're focusing more on the rowing than the swimming, unless you're about to jump in.
I've got no plans of jumping into the water this morning, I can tell you that, although it is quite a beautiful morning here on the Thames. Yes, we are at Fulham Reach Club, which is a rowing club that aims to really make rowing so much more accessible for all abilities, for people from all backgrounds. And of course, it's a really exciting day for them as we look across to Paris, 2 really key races in particular in which we could see gold medals. Certainly, we're hoping that Team GB in the men's and women's fours will place. And I'm actually joined now by Adam Freeman-Pask. You're the CEO of the Fulham Reach Boat Club. Talk to me a little bit around, first of all, about the job that you do here in West London.
Oh my God, yeah. So, we're a sport for good charity. So we're all about opening out the sport and really trying to broaden out who can get into it. So we run lots of programmes with lots of the local state schools. So we're working with 12 local state schools through term time. And then at the moment, over the holidays, we're running our amazing free water sport weeks, which are open and free to access. And we've been having close to 30 kids a day come down and enjoying and actually learning to row this week, which has been fantastic. So for them, they've had the opportunity to learn to row on this lovely water here in London. And then they've been watching the Olympics on the telly straight after. So it's been an absolutely amazing experience for them this week, learning to row with us.
And I know you're an international rower, certainly former international rower. What have you been excited about for the Olympics? What can we look forward to later on today? How strong do you think our hopes for a medal are?
Oh, I mean, today, really exciting. So lots of great races to watch. A really keen eye on the women's 4 and the men's 4s racing today. And, I mean, yesterday was so amazing with the women's quad gold. Obviously, all our new rowers and young people were here yesterday and watching that, and we were just in disbelief at how they managed to snatch that gold in the last few strokes. So, yeah, we're looking forward to lots more excitement today and lots more of that inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a photo finish, wasn't it, yesterday? And I know that our two teams today really have such potential there. When it comes to potential, though, at the sort of lower level, when it comes to bringing in people from all activities, are you hopeful that these kids that you'll see coming this week, could there be a future GB star amongst them, or is it just about making rowing something that everyone can take part in?
Rowing is such a powerful sport. It teaches people such deep kind of team-working skills, which we believe can go towards actually forming stronger communities. We also get all the health benefits of being out here in the beautiful open space of the Thames. When you think about how crammed people are in London, it's about 80 people per football pitch. Here we've got 15,000 football pitches of space to play in, you know, so it's all about making the most of those benefits for us. But yeah, we've taught close to 1,500 children to row this year, and who knows, out of those numbers there could be some talent in there. And actually this morning we've got our coach Yuande, so just over there in the bright orange and green boats are two of our young rowers that are training in the exciting new format of rowing, which is beach sprint rowing, which is coming in for the LA Olympics in 2028. So Yuande's been coaching on the GB team, and she's got two promising young athletes there. And, you know, these are definitely people we should be keeping an eye on, you know. We're hoping that they can go all the way, and we're supporting them with everything we do here.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, I'll let you go. I know you've got a lot to be doing today when it comes to teaching these youngsters who are coming in, but also getting ready with, I'm sure, the popcorn for those races, which are taking place, I think, just before 10 o'clock and just afterwards as well. So it's going to be a really exciting morning for rowing.
Oh, my God, it's going to be amazing. We're really, really excited. We can't wait to see some of those medals come in later.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we've beached a little bit here on the other side of the Thames, so I think we need to work out how to get back over to Fulham Boat Club. But listen, Adam, it's been brilliant chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rachel, great stuff. I love that. And particularly interested, actually, about hearing about the new format for rowing for the next Olympics, too. Now, a take-home pill, which could be a game-changer for hundreds of blood cancer patients, is now available on the NHS in England. Patients with a form of blood cancer known as marginal zone lymphoma can now be offered an additional treatment option which could halt the progression of their cancer and provide an alternative to further rounds of chemotherapy. The NHS estimates that almost 500 patients could benefit from the drug over the next 3 years. Professor Peter Johnson, the National Clinical Director for Cancer at the NHS in England, joins us now to discuss this. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. So this is a single pill that you take daily?
Yes, this is a tablet which you take 1 or 2 of a day, and what it does is the chemical in there switches off the growth signals that make the lymphoma cells grow. And this is a type of targeted treatment that we've been seeing more and more of over the last few years. And it's really positive that this fairly uncommon type of blood cancer, which up to now hasn't had any very specific treatments just for this type, we've now got something for. And NHS England has negotiated a deal with the manufacturers of this drug, zanubrutinib, to make sure that it can be available on the NHS for those people who have already had some type of treatment, but where the lymphomas come back or where the treatment hasn't worked.
And does it have lower side effects than chemotherapy, for example?
It's a lot easier to take. Obviously, you don't have to go to hospital for intravenous injections. It doesn't make you sick and it doesn't make your hair come out. So it's a lot more attractive than chemotherapy for many, many people. Yes, absolutely.
Does it have some side effects?
Yes, almost all drugs have some side effects, and because this affects the cells of the immune system, it reduces people's resistance to infection. So that's something we always have to be aware of, and people who are taking this treatment are monitored very regularly to make sure that they remain well and that they know how to get help if they get an infection, for example. But generally speaking, it is very much easier than the conventional types of chemotherapy.
So just also outline for us who qualifies to be able to get it now.
So this is for people with this unusual type of lymphoma called marginal zone lymphoma, of whom we see about 2,500 people a year in the UK. And if they've had previous treatment, but the lymphoma's come back, or if they've had treatment and the lymphoma hasn't gone away, then they can now take this tablet treatment instead. So we're still starting with the conventional type of treatment, but this is the backup option. And that's very important because this is a type of cancer that, although it will often go into remission with treatment, doesn't usually go away completely.
And so does this pill, this tablet, something that can change outcomes for people who might have had quite a serious or bad diagnosis, or is it more a case of managing their outcomes?
It can keep people's disease at bay for very long periods of time. And what we've seen with the trials that have been done is that this particular type of lymphoma responds very well to this type of treatment. So it's a really good option for people, as I say, whose lymphoma has come back, to make sure that it goes away again, and which it does in 8 out of 10 cases. And you can continue taking this tablet for a long period of time in order to keep the lymphoma at bay.
And how much is it costing the NHS? How long have these negotiations gone on to get us to this point?
The answer to the money is that I don't know. This is a deal that the NHS has negotiated to make sure that this is really good value for money for the taxpayer. And this is a negotiation which has been going on in the last year or so. So this is quite a new type of treatment. And the important thing is it's the first time that we've had for this uncommon cancer. Really important to emphasize that we're keen to make sure we have new types of treatment, not just for the big cancers, breast cancer, prostate cancer, bowel cancer, but also people with less common illnesses. We're really looking at the most cutting-edge treatments that we can get for them.
And just finally, I mean, how many of the cancers, I guess maybe a rough percentage of the types of cancers that people have here, has treatment come on remarkably in the last decade, like the ones that we're talking about now, versus those cancers that are still, sadly, pretty much untreatable or uncurable?
Yes, obviously many different types of cancer, and we've seen a big explosion of these types of targeted treatment where we can switch off the growth signals of cancer cells. We've also seen huge advances in using the immune system to fight cancers, but there are still some types, things like pancreatic cancer, where unfortunately we often pick it up quite late, and the treatments that we have are still not really as effective as we would like them to be. So we're really focused on trying to pick up cancers as early as possible. We've got a big program, for example, to pick up lung cancer, where previously the outlook had been very poor, and we've started to see that we're seeing more and more people through our lung cancer trucks, which go out and do CT scans in the community. We're seeing more lung cancers at an early stage. And the really important thing there is, of course, if you can catch cancer early, then that's your best chance of treating it effectively.
Professor Peter Johnson, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick final story for you. There appears to be new signs of new life in the stump of the felled Sycamore Gap tree. Well, last year the tree near Hadrian's Wall was cut down, sparking outrage from the public. Now, 8 new shoots have been found growing from the stump, according to the National Trust, who said the new growth could form new trees around the original stump. Part of the tree has been put on display in Hexham, not far from where it first sat. Well, we're out of time this hour on Sky News Breakfast. When we come back, we'll have all of the day's top stories from both Southport and the Middle East.
Hello, good morning. It is 8 o'clock. A 17-year-old has been charged with murder and attempted murder in relation to the mass stabbing here in Southport. Clashes broke out between police and protesters in Westminster in the wake of this attack, with the Metropolitan Police saying 100 people have been arrested.
Also ahead this morning, Iran's Ayatollah leads prayers at the funeral for Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, following and vowing revenge after his death. The Bank of England is to announce its latest interest rate decision at midday, and it could be a cut for the first time in 4 years. And the treatment of families failed by a Welsh hospital's maternity unit, deemed appalling by investigators.
Hello, good morning to you from Southport. Our top story, a significant development happening overnight. A 17-year-old boy charged with murder and attempted murder after the mass stabbing here in Southport. 3 young girls, 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and 9-year-old Elise Aguirre died as a result of the attack that took place at the Half Space Community Centre. The suspect is going to appear at Liverpool City Magistrates Court this morning. The Crown Prosecution Service and Merseyside Police gave this update late last night.
A 17-year-old boy from Banks has been charged with the murders of BB, Elsie and Alice. 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article following the tragic incident in Southport on Monday, the 29th of July. The 17-year-old cannot be named for legal reasons as he is under 18. He has been remanded in custody to appear tomorrow, the Thursday, the 1st of August, at Liverpool Magistrates Court, Derby Square. Whilst these charges are a significant milestone within this investigation, this remains very much a live investigation, and we continue to work with our partners from Lancashire Police and Counter-Terrorism Policing North West. I would like to thank all the forces who've offered and supplied support to Merseyside Police during the last 3 days, and I can confirm that we are being supported with investigative resources from across the North West. Thank you.
Well, violent protests broke out in London, as you saw, and Hartlepool last night, following misinformation that had been spread online about the attack here in Southport. In London, the Met saying that over 100 people were arrested, they say, for offences that included violent disorder, assault on an emergency worker and breach of protest conditions. Our correspondent Ashna Hiranag is alongside me once again this morning. Ashna, let's first start by focusing on the violence we saw last night in pockets of the UK, because there had been a fear there would be a repeat here on the streets of Southport. That wasn't the case because of measures that the police put in place, but it did happen elsewhere. What do we know?
Incredibly challenging situations and scenarios that so many officers have had to contend with right across the country. We're seeing this kind of growing tension within some pockets of and some communities across the UK. Hartlepool, you mentioned, Manchester too, and also down in the capital in London. It follows events here on Tuesday night, but in London over 100 arrests were made by Metropolitan Police after that violent disorder that we saw last night. Police in Hartlepool, they're attacked by missiles or projectiles, things being thrown at them, essentially glass bottles included, and eggs. We also saw a police car being set alight last night. Cleveland police there say 8 arrests were made, as I say, including violent disorder. In Manchester too, we saw some disruption there, some 40 people gathering outside a hotel, we understand, that was housing asylum seekers. They were intimidating some members of the public there. And as I mentioned, on Tuesday night, it follows the disorder that we saw here on the streets of Southport. So many people were not from the local area. Locals I was speaking to yesterday who were trying to clean up some of the mess that had been left behind, and it was an extremely terrible sight yesterday. They said they saw hundreds of people piling off trains on Tuesday night. Many people who came to that demonstration, that protest or that unrest, I suppose, were not from this area. It was described as being shameful. And this anger, we're seeing it being fueled by social media speculation largely around the identity the suspect, but all we know of this teenager thus far is that he is British-born, he's from Wales, and almost all of the speculation has been false, including a false name that has been widely circulated on social media. Disinformation, the police say, has helped nobody.
Let's talk about that significant development that happened late last night. Many people waking up to the news that the suspect in custody, the 17-year-old boy, has been charged. People in these streets waking up to this news. Can you talk us through proceedings today? Because he is going to appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court. You've followed many of these court cases. Talk us through how this progresses.
This is the first stage, so the first appearance of this suspect. Because he is 17 years old, we are not able to name him. The police will not be doing so at all. And usually at Magistrates Court's hearings, you hear some details around this person, but they would not be reportable. They would not be able to be made public. But just to say, it was incredibly unusual. Last night at midnight, the most senior police officer here in Merseyside, Sarah Kennedy, alongside the Deputy Crown Prosecutor, held a press conference at midnight to announce that they had charged this individual and that they would be appearing in a few hours' time, we expect, at Liverpool Magistrates Court. Usually what happens is, in such significant cases such as this, often the hearings will be very short, and often we may well see the same day that suspect being transferred to Crown Court. So perhaps that could happen this afternoon. The fact that we had the press conference in the middle of the night, I think, speaks to the gravitas and the strength of this story. And as I say, so much of the anger has been around this suspect. We're not hearing things like the time of this trial. We understand that there is some expectation there could be trouble outside of Liverpool today, and our colleagues on the ground are seeing that there are a number of officers just being in the area to reassure the community. Much of that too we have seen here today. Alongside this cordon, there are officers that are standing by here too, and that continuing work of support for the community will also continue whilst that suspect is awaiting his trial.
OK, Ashna, thank you. Ashna Huranag with the latest on that significant development that many people here in Southport are waking up to, because Ashna said it happened so late last night, so the news are all waking up to. We will continue to follow developments as that suspect appears in Liverpool Magistrates Court this morning. Well, for the meantime, I'll hand back to you.
Ashay, thanks so much. Well, in response to those protests that Sarah Jane and Ashna have been discussing, the Prime Minister will meet with senior police leaders in Downing Street this afternoon. Mari's here to discuss the significance of that. Mari, quite a big step to summon police leaders for this sort of discussion in Downing Street itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the Prime Minister trying to demonstrate the government's backing, the government's support for the police force and emergency services across the UK after we saw violence erupting not just on the streets of Southport, but also Hartlepool and here in London outside Downing Street. And so there is concern of the fact that we've seen so much kind of violence and disorder in such a short space of time. Now, the Prime Minister is going to be hosting this roundtable event in Downing Street today, and he's also going to be using this event as a reminder of the bravery of the police force and the emergency services and how vital their contribution is to keeping the public safe. He's also going to talk about the fact that actually it's a really, really important cornerstone of democracy to have the right to protest, and especially the right to peaceful protest. But what he wants to make clear is actually that criminals who are sowing hatred or committing acts of violence should be met with the full force of the law, and also that he says he wants to really show his commitment to working with the police, and he wants to remind the police, many would say they don't need reminding, but remind the police that they should be using all of their powers available to crack down on any senseless violence that they come across, that they see, and that they are having to tackle at the moment.
I wonder the extent to which this last week's events, in so many different ways, has been a wake-up call to the scale of the responsibility of the job. I mean, of course, the attack in the first place, by far the most shocking. The protests, perhaps the next most shocking. I wonder if it's surprising to him that he personally got heckled when he was there, when clearly there have only been in power a short space of time, and just a sort of reminder of the strength of feeling about knife crime.
I think the difficulty is, you know, there was that heckler, and we don't know why that person was heckling, whether they were heckling because they were concerned about knife crime or whether they were heckling because they'd maybe been reading some of this false information online. We don't know what the thinking behind that heckler was. But this is part and parcel of being the Prime Minister, and you get heckled and you get blamed for things irrespective of they are technically your fault or not. If you are now in power, this is now your responsibility. Doesn't really matter about who was in power a month ago. It is now your job. And so, especially when people are frustrated, angry, concerned, they are going to want to feel like they're getting answers from their government. And therefore, I think that is why these kinds of conversations, as we were talking earlier, Wilfred, about knife crime and things like that, are going to need to happen, because the public are going to want to try and find a way for the government to say, we're going to try and stop this happening again.
Mark, great stuff. Thank you. Now, funeral proceedings are being held for Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Haniyeh was assassinated yesterday during a visit to the city, and Iran has vowed revenge for his killing. And last night, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will exact a heavy price from any further aggression in the wake of the killing. Our international correspondent John Sparks has the details for us.
With a broad smile and a fulsome handshake, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh greets officials in the Iranian parliament, here posing for pictures at the inauguration of the country's new president, one of the last things he would ever do. In the early hours, the residence of Ismail Haniyeh was hit, said the newsreader. The incident is under investigation. But it didn't take long to point the finger. Israel blamed immediately by the Iranian government and these protesters in Tehran. A protege of the organization's founder, Sheikh Yassin, Haniyeh became the leader of Hamas in 2006 and tried to push it in a political direction. Yet he was committed to armed struggle. Designated a terrorist by the Americans in 2018, the International Criminal Court also sought a warrant for his arrest. But many saw him as pragmatic, even moderate, as he tried to negotiate a ceasefire with Israel. In the West Bank, hundreds of Palestinians took to the streets in a series of noisy protests, here hoisting the green flag of Hamas. In Hebron, they held Haniyeh's picture aloft before the skirmishes began with Israeli forces. Politicians said the assassination would serve to energize the Palestinian cause. In Gaza, the news of Haniyeh's demise was greeted with dismay. Our team traveling to the place where the 62-year-old grew up, the Shati refugee camp near Gaza City. There's not much left of the neighborhood now, but those who remain proclaimed him a man of the people.
Everyone loved him because he was so humble with everyone, young and old, the father of good deeds and of forgiveness.
He was betrayed. They couldn't take him out in Gaza, where he'd lived for years and years, and they never got him. They took him out when he was in a foreign country.
For the family members of the Israeli hostages seen gathering here in Jerusalem, it is an event of undeniable significance. The Israelis, it seems, have eliminated their principal counterpart when hopes of a deal were arising. Yet many see no other way. Isn't there a contradiction here? The Israeli government both trying to destroy Hamas and negotiate with them through intermediaries at the same time?
This is a good question. Terror organizations like Hamas, like Al-Qaeda, they don't really care like we care about people, about the circumstances, about real life. It doesn't have the same way of thinking like you and I. And if you don't push it, they see it as a weakness.
Hamas has recovered from similar setbacks. The death of Haniyeh will not destroy it, but it may shatter the balance in the region. The risk of escalation has never been so great.
Well, John Sparks able to join us live now from Jerusalem. John, let's pick up on how you ended there, the risk of escalation. What's the latest on that?
Well, I think that the death of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and also the assassination of this top Hezbollah commander in South Beirut has left the Middle East on the edge, I think. We've got the Iranians vowing revenge, both the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the new president as well. Khamenei saying, "It is our duty to avenge his blood," and it is being reported this morning that Khamenei has authorized a direct strike on Israel. I can tell you that they're holding the funeral processions for Khamenei in Tehran as we speak. What's going on behind the scenes? Well, start with the fact that this is a major embarrassment for Iran. Haniyeh was staying at a highly secure state guest house while he was in town for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. That was supposed to be highly secure, but the Iranians were not able to keep him safe. They will be looking to re-establish, the regime anyway, will be looking to re-establish deterrence. They will want to defend their sovereignty. They will want the Israelis to pay a price for this, because what Israel has done is that it has shown that it can kill its enemies when and wherever it likes in the region, and that's quite a thing. A quick word about the ceasefire in Gaza, the negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza, Wilfred. We've had the assassination in Ismail Haniyeh of the lead negotiator on the Hamas side. I think it's fair to say that those negotiations are not in a good place. The main players, some of the main interlocutors from Egypt, from Qatar, the Qataris have played a major role, asking whether Israel is actually serious about seeking peace in Gaza. The Qatari Prime Minister Al Thani saying, "How can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side?" We've had a host of other countries joining in on that condemnation of the killing of Haniyeh.
John Sparks, thanks so much for that perspective from Jerusalem. Well, meanwhile, in Lebanon, as John alluded to, funeral proceedings are also taking place following a blast in Beirut that killed a senior Hezbollah commander. Israel's claimed responsibility for that attack, saying that Fouad Shukr was responsible for a strike on a football pitch in the occupied Golan Heights that killed a dozen children and teenagers. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has this report from Beirut.
Emergency workers are still clearing the rubble from the Israeli strike in the heart of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Bedrooms have been exposed and personal belongings are now half buried under stones and debris. Almost hidden amongst the wreckage, you can just about make out a child's Pikachu bear. The Lebanese fighting group Hezbollah, which is closely allied with Iran, confirmed that their senior commander Fouad Shukr was in the building. Military sources told us it took rescue workers a night and a day to locate the body of the fighter, who was the Hezbollah leader's right-hand man, his deputy.
This is not going to calm things, right in a densely populated civilian area as well as a Hezbollah stronghold.
Local Hezbollah leaders are furious and immediately vowed revenge.
Israel will be punished.
Okay, and how is this going to lead to a regional war?
It will be punished soon.
And is this going to lead to a regional war? Because that's what everyone is worried about.
You should be wait, just wait.
The attack on the Lebanese capital, along with another strike 12 hours later in the Iranian capital, Tehran, is being seen as incendiary, and Lebanese politicians are viewing it as an aggressive breach of sovereignty.
I think the international community has been too patient with Israel. And within Israel, people know that they need to stop the fighting and to stop the killing. And we call on them to do this now and not spend more effort and money and killing as a waste. It's a waste.
Do you worry for Lebanon now?
I worry for Lebanon. I worry for the Arab world. I worry for all of the region. I worry about an international conflict.
But along with the commander, the community of Dahiya came together in its hundreds to mourn a brother and sister also killed in the Israeli attack. Their brother is in a critical condition in hospital. Many of those present were reduced to tears. 2 women were also killed. And Lebanon's health ministry said there were more than 70 wounded. And the twin assassinations appears to have only strengthened the resolve amongst the Hezbollah faithful. Hezbollah and Hamas are inextricably linked, and in the winding lanes of one of Beirut's refugee camps, they were honouring the memory of the Hamas chief negotiator. The man talking in front of the poster of Ismail Haniyeh was a close friend of his and fellow member of the Hamas political leadership team.
We're a resistance movement that's not going away, and we have the right to a strong retaliation. But I can't say, from my political position, exactly how or on what level this retaliation will be. We'll find out in the coming days.
Hezbollah's released another chilling video showing what they claim is surveillance detail of key Israeli sites, including the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv, apparently an indication of the group's potential targets. The grieving masses in Beirut are simmering with a yearning to avenge those killed. Hamas and Hezbollah are certainly expected to respond. The key question is, what will Iran do, and how strong will any retaliation be? This region is at its most precarious point since the start of the war in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
More from the Middle East later, and we will be joined by a former ICC prosecutor later in the show also. But time now for the latest on the Olympics. Day 6, of course, in Paris. More medals up for grabs for Team GB in both rowing and swimming in particular. Team GB will be hoping to keep up the momentum of the success from yesterday when 5 medals were picked up across the Games. Let's have a look at the table as things stand. Well, China currently top, 9 gold medals they have, followed by France and Japan, who both have 8. After yesterday's additions to the haul, Team GB currently 5th with 6 gold medals. Well, our correspondent Rachel Venables is at Fulham Reach Boat Club, ahead, of course, of, as we mentioned, a lot of high-profile rowing events today, next to a legend of the sport, no less. Over to you, Rachel.
Yes, I'm back on the Thames, so welcome to this beautiful stretch of water here in West London. I'm told the conditions are absolutely perfect. It's certainly beautiful and calm here. We're just sitting and enjoying and watching as the rowers head out in the morning. This is Fulham Reach Boat Club, which is a club that aims really to make rowing much more accessible to anyone of all abilities and backgrounds. But of course, this is such an exciting day for Team GB rowers, and I am delighted to be joined here by Sir Steve Redgrave. Sir Steve, talk to me first of all about how the Paris Olympics have been going on so far for Team GB rowing in general.
I did our first day of finals yesterday, which we took one gold medal out of the 2 finals and a 4th place. A little bit disappointed with the 4th place, but that sport is going really well. We've got a good day today with 4 finals, but we're in 3 of them, and each one of them could win a medal. The girls' double scull will be the first up. They were the last boat to qualify only 8 weeks ago, and they've been just sort of storming through the field, got themselves into a final which we wouldn't have dreamed of 4 weeks ago, and now they've got a chance of a medal. Them following by Helen Glover and the women's 4, that favourites to win. They were silver medalists at last year's World Championships and haven't been beaten this year, so hopefully they'll keep that going. And then the men's 4, which we have a huge history within, they're going to find it tough. They are reigning world champions, but America and New Zealand have got a really fast 4. The medals will be split between them.
Fantastic. And I know you were just telling me that you used to train from Hammersmith, which is just down past us. You said you must have cast off from there, what, thousands and thousands of times in your career?
Thousands of times training for the Seoul Olympics, that one was,
Yeah, and how does it feel, I guess, to be back on the water today and to see the shape that British rowing has taken, in those decades? I mean, such an incredible transformation, such a positive transformation.
Well, as sport as the whole, we did really badly at the Atlanta Olympics '96, and that's where the National Lottery came on board. And we were able to give out grants for athletes of improving infrastructure, of picking up a setup that at the highest level we can have our teams competing with everybody else in the world, which we have been doing for the last 30 years. But there's a grassroots of venues like this, that's what the National Lottery is supporting as well, is bringing on the next generation. Now, maybe in 4 years' time or 8 years' time, some of these kids could be competing for gold medals themselves.
And how do you spot that talent? Is there a magical solution when you see a youngster pick up, the oar and get into a boat and you think they've got what it takes, or is it just about the drive and the determination?
There is a physical demand to every sport of physical makeup. The comprehensive school that I went to, the head of the English department started the school boat club and asked a few people to row, and he used to talk about the size of their hands and feet. If they had big hands and feet, they're growing to big people. Rowing is a leverage sport, so it chooses bigger people. You've got gymnastics, they tend to be smaller. And so there is a sport out there, certainly Olympic sport, of every size and shape of person, and it's finding the right one at the right time and the enthusiasm, the passion to get to the top level.
Fantastic. And then just lastly, for anybody watching those races later on today, what should they look out for? Is there one particular to focus on, or one particular person or story that you want them to know about to really enthuse that passion?
Well, you got Helen Glover, who's a mother of three, in her fourth Olympics, came fourth the last Olympics, but 2 gold medals before that, and I think she's going to add to our Olympic gold medal tally from that. Don't be surprised if they're not out in front at the beginning. They might not leave it quite as late as the quadruple scull did yesterday, but the second half they'll be stronger than anybody else, and I think that's when they'll take control.
Fantastic. So Steve Redgrave, thank you so much for speaking to us, for coming on the boat this morning as well, and for being such a good sport. On that note, we do have a wonderful driver here, Andrew, and I know he's driving on the back. I wonder if we can get you down to Hammersmith, can we, and get you in one more boat? I'll give it a try. Pick up an oar one more time.
I think my rowing days are over.
He's going to make a jump for the shore. But thank you so much for speaking to us, and really exciting couple of hours to come for GB rowing.
Rachel, great stuff there with Sir Steve Redgrave. It almost, Leah, feels cheating by using a motor when Sir Steve is in the boat.
He's there, this powerhouse.
Or Rachel. I mean, give it a go. Get him to give
I'd
some
like to see that. We need to get a GoPro down there.
It does look very enticing there, the Thames this morning, on such hot days we've had of late.
Would you take a dip?
Probably not. Okay. Not with all the details as well about the Seine. Actually, I wonder which is less dirty between the two rivers.
Yeah, well, the Seine got the go-ahead, didn't it?
Just.
I wouldn't be tempted myself.
And both of those races were pretty exciting. The women's, I've forgotten the lady's name, but a French favourite, and of course, in the men, came through for a goal for Team GB. The rowing is great to watch. It's interesting that Sir Steve was saying that, how don't necessarily expect them to be out front at the start, but they'll come back a bit later. Talking about Helen Glover in the sculls and things, because it's very, like with the swimming, it's very easy to sort of track and watch someone making a late charge. Some of the other sports, the camera angle's more complicated and all that, but it's usually a pretty exciting race to watch the rowing.
Yeah, Katie Ledecky was insane. Yeah, that's one of my favourite, the swimming in the Aquatic Centre. Anyway, I've got a job to do, haven't I?
You do.
There are some headlines to tell viewers at home all about. We're going to start with the BBC, though. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, will meet the BBC's boss today after Hugh Edwards admitted to possessing indecent images of children. Well, yesterday, the broadcaster admitted it was aware the former newsreader was arrested in November, but continued to employ him until April. Mr Edwards has pleaded guilty to having 41 indecent photographs of children. Now, 3 suspects accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks have reached a plea deal with prosecutors. The suspects, including the alleged mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, have been held at a US Navy base in Cuba for more than 2 decades. From Washington, Sky's US correspondent James Matthews has more.
There are 3 individuals on Guantanamo who were behind the 9/11 attacks, and they include the man seen as the architect-in-chief. He's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He used to be al-Qaeda's propaganda chief, and he's said to be the man who went to Osama bin Laden with the idea of hijacking commercial airliners and flying them into buildings. He's then accused of having trained and directed the hijackers involved. The trio have been in US custody for 20 years. Their cases have been mired in legal argument around their time in CIA prisons and whether or not torture has undermined the evidence gathered against them. Full details of the plea agreement aren't being made public as of yet, but it's understood that the 3 being spared the death penalty is part of it. They're expected to make their plea in the coming days, but they won't be sentenced until later next year for the terrorist atrocity that killed nearly 3,000 people.
Staying with the US, Donald Trump has been criticised over comments he made questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris, speaking at a convention hosted by the National Association of Black Journalists. Mr. Trump questioned whether the vice president was black.
I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
Well, speaking at a rally in Houston last night, the Vice President had this reaction to the former president's remarks.
Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better.
Well, we've got lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show. We'll be speaking to the former ICC prosecutor, Sir Geoffrey Nice, about the situation in Israel and Gaza. And later on, we'll be speaking to the author of Catherine, Princess of Wales, a new book coming out on the Princess of Wales, due this weekend. Finally, could the Sycamore Gap tree live on? Experts find more shoots around the stump of the illegally felled tree. We'll have that story too.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent and I'm based here in Beijing.
We help you understand the world with us. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Welcome back. Funeral proceedings are being held for Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Haniyeh was assassinated during a visit to the city, fueling tensions in the region. Joining me now from Canterbury is Sir Geoffrey Nice, a former prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. A very good morning. To you, Sir Geoffrey, what is initially your reaction to the killing of Hania, obviously on Iranian soil?
Prosecutor at the Yugoslav Tribunal, not at the ICC. I worked at the ICC. My initial reaction is to get people to understand that Hania, who I met once on the 5th of November 2014, seems to have been regarded as an objective or possibly objective and pragmatic negotiator. Therefore, his assassination is very hard to understand. And what is very important, I think, for your viewers to understand is that in 2014, in his interview with me, but more important, in 2015, Abbas and Hamas wanted the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to investigate Israel's conduct of the 2014 Operation Protective Edge, where 2,300 Palestinians and some tens of Israelis were killed, 500 children in Palestine, for example, in Gaza, for example. And since that time, since that willingness on the both parts of the Palestinian community in the land of Palestine or Israel wanted an investigation. What has happened? Well, we now know from an article published in The Guardian and not in any way challenged that Mossad, presumably with knowledge and support of America, and with America also taking a similar position, was doing everything it could to impede, stop an investigation of criminality by both sides. And Hania recognized when I spoke to him that both sides would be investigated if, as he had wanted, Bensouda had been allowed in to Gaza. She was not allowed in. And what we have to ask ourselves, particularly with regard to the United Kingdom, is if other countries, such as our own countries, were party to the American efforts to stop an investigation, maybe something that succeeded for 8 years, were they actually party to an activity that, had it been successful, had the investigation gone ahead, might have meant the terrible events of October last year and all that followed might never have happened? If both sides realized, and we don't know what the developing mental state was of the people in the West Bank and in Gaza, Hamas and Mr. Abbas, we don't know what their developing states of mind were in that period of time. But if in that period of time, both sides had recognized that there was no impunity coming their way because investigations were being stopped, things might have been different and nothing might have happened that has happened.
So Geoffrey, there's a lot to unpack there. So just wanted to try and go through it step by step.
Yes,
first and foremost, I presume there is no excuse in your mind whatsoever for the events of October the 7th?
Of course not.
No, just wanted to check that because in the unframing of something that might or might not have happened 7 or 8 years earlier, suggesting if the years earlier had been different, that October the 7th might not have happened. I just wanted to clarify that you didn't think any of those things in those preceding years were an excuse for October the 7th.
No, you can go further than that. You can say that firing unaimed rockets in civilian areas by Hamas was always illegal and criminal. There's no problem with that.
So just want to check that. Also, early on in your answer, you described Hania as objective. Again, I just wanted to clarify that. Objective relative to what or to who? Because clearly he is the leader of a terrorist group that supported the acts of October the 7th.
Objective may not be the best word. I think what word is being used by those who presumably knew him in negotiations or knew of negotiations is that he was pragmatic and was seen to be pragmatic and therefore seen to be a person who might have been able to help with the process of present negotiations. So it's no more than that. But that's enough to make his being assassinated a slightly surprising thing for, if it was Israel to do.
But we can all debate about what might fill the void, but he was a leader that was responsible, if not in full, in part, for terrorist activities.
That may well be the case, but that's not the point with which I'm concerned. I'm concerned that people should understand that following a willingness by him and by Abbas to have a full, impartial investigation by the ICC of the events of 2014 might well have changed history. You have only to think of this by a parallel of what if, if you like. If you're operating some criminal activity in Great Britain and you believe you've got freedom to do it because for some reason the police aren't going to investigate you, which is what was achieved by forces outside the ICC, it appears, for 8 years. If you believe that's the position, then you'll carry on until such time as you hear that, oh, things have changed, and now you are going to be investigated, I don't know, for running some enormous drug plant or something like that.
I understand that if it's absolutely explicit and if the factors that we're talking about are sort of comparable. But in referencing a story that I think you're referring to came out in The Guardian in May to capture what in your eyes happened for a period of 8 years. And again, I just want to clarify because I think you're putting weight on that story because you're saying it wasn't challenged as opposed to being that the story was proved. And I think you've used the word reportedly and presumably quite a lot in relation to that story. So are you confident that it's fact and that thus it can be used as something that could have diverted the course of history and led to October the 7th not happening? Or really is responsibility for the October the 7th attacks ultimately, including, by the way, Israel's response to it, on the people that carried those out today, as opposed to all sorts of little butterfly moments in history leading up to it?
I'm quite satisfied that what is in those reports is reliable and accurate. Now, Fatim Bensouda is said on a couple of occasions to have made no comment. She's now the High Commissioner of her country to the United Kingdom, and she's unable, of course, to make comments on facts of that kind unless they were false. Can you really imagine an ambassador facing allegations about another country of that kind that she knew to be false and is herself a senior diplomat not correcting them? She has never said anything to correct what is in those reports. And I am quite confident that what is in those reports is accurate. And if your viewers turn the reports up, what was being done was, and what was happening was efforts on various levels against Mrs. Bensouda herself, threatening her security, which basically means threatening life, and attacking her husband in other ways, or attempting to get at her husband in other ways. This was the maximum level of possible intervention with the judicial process. Now ask your viewers, if you will, would they have liked, in the period of time since, say, 2014 or the earlier investigation of 2008-9, would they have liked an impartial body to investigate the criminality on both sides, the alleged criminality on both sides? The answer is they would. Is it possible that investigation by an impartial arbiter of that kind would have stopped both sides, considering it possible to act in a way that may have been criminal? Yes, they would.
Well, I mean, look, you're asking questions of the viewers and answering them, so I don't need to put those questions in front of them. It seems I'm sure everyone always welcomes impartiality and full investigations. There's no doubt about that. But I think just to round things off, because we're out of time, it doesn't surely change the fact that what happened, including the response and where the responses have been wrong, is the responsibility for those that carried them out. And hard to say conclusively, as I think you're implying, that had this story, which maybe you have much better information than I do, but I don't think has been forcibly confirmed, not taken place, that those events might have been avoided in a way that could excuse those that carried them out.
My observation is that the one thing we need at the moment is deterrence. We need deterrence of future acts. The law, international law, doesn't do much. Convictions of war crimes don't seem to stop people. But investigation of potential criminality, the threat or the risk of having to have your hands in handcuffs is something that very probably does have effect. And if our country, America, and any other countries had impeded the International Criminal Court in an investigation where there may have been criminality on one side or both, why then those countries, including Israel and Mossad, may well bear responsibility for a failure of deterrence where deterrence could quite possibly have happened. And believe me, your viewers in vast majorities are appalled at the tens of thousands of lives lost on both sides since October. And if anything had been done that could have impeded that, deterred that, then it should have been done. And our government should be asked specifically, or rather the Foreign Office, should be asked whether it had been party to obstructing the International Criminal Court's prosecutor in her work and later his work.
Well, Sir Geoffrey, thank you so much for joining us today. Always great to catch up, and certainly nobody is doubting the sense of shock, appalling nature of all these deaths on all sides. Now, switching focus, the Bank of England are due to announce their latest interest rate decision at midday. Quite possible that they'll be cutting interest rates for the first time in 4 years. The current rate, 5.25%. If they do cut, likely to be 25 basis points down to 5%. The chances of a hike, essentially zero. Let's get all the details with Ian King, who joins us from the City this morning. So, Ian, give us the context of this. Obviously, rates have been hiked many times. They've been flat for a while. Could we get that first interest rate cut in many years?
Well, the financial markets are certainly pricing in that eventuality, Wilf. The market's currently ascribing a 65-66% probability of an interest rate cut this lunchtime, but it's going to be very, very finely balanced indeed. You'll probably get, if we do get a rate cut, a 5-4 vote. And there are reasons why, very good reasons why you wouldn't, in fact, move interest rates today. Yes, the headline rate of inflation is at 2%. It has been for a couple of months. No, back down to the Bank of England's target rate. But you dig beneath the surface and you look at services inflation, which is running at 5.7%. Services, of course, is 4/5 of the UK economy. You've got wage inflation running at 5.7% as well, way above where the Bank of England would be comfortable with seeing that. And bear in mind, of course, the new government this week agreed massive inflation-busting pay rises for millions of public sector workers. And I think some on the Monetary Policy Committee will be slightly unnerved by that as well, because that potentially has a knock-on effect for wage inflation in the wider economy. Incidentally, Wilf, we've also had today some house prices data from the Nationwide Building Society. House prices rising by 2.1% year on year in July. That's the highest since December 2022. And again, these are all indications that inflation has not quite been vanquished. And I suspect some members of the MPC will be nervous about that. On the other side of the ledger, the UK economy has grown more strongly than any other G7 economy this year, but there's been a lot of indications from, for example, the Eurozone, from the United States, that both of those economies are softening, and some members of the MPC will probably look at that and think, well, we're probably in for that in the UK as well. So it's a really, really finely balanced judgment.
Ian, as always, thanks so much, Ian King there in the City of London. Sky, of course, will have the interest rate decision live at midday. Now, new research has found that teens who have a problematic relationship with their smartphones are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression and insomnia. Our technology correspondent, Arti Nachapan, has more on this. So what exactly is this research suggesting?
So it's looking into specifically problematic use of smartphones. So this is behaviours that resemble addiction but are probably a level below that. It's not quite as extreme, but it is things like struggling to manage the amount of time you spend on your phone, panicking when you're away from your phone. And the suggestion from the study is that teenagers who suffer from that, which is a minority, about 1/5 of older teenagers, are more likely to be anxious, suffer from insomnia and depression. Interestingly, it's not the same as screen time, because teenagers have the same amount of screen time, but don't have as an unhealthy relationship with their phones didn't seem to have the same link, apart from with insomnia. But if we look at what they found was helpful to handle this, it's things like putting your phone in another room when you're sleeping, turning off notifications, putting it on Do Not Disturb. There were other things that young people had tried that weren't as effective, so things like putting your phone in grayscale, which is turning the colour off. But another interesting point from the study is that a lot of young people said that they did want help in actually reducing their phone usage. That's something to take forward.
Artie, great stuff. Thanks so much. We've got lots more to come here on The Breakfast Show. Next up, I'll speak with the author of Catherine, Princess of Wales, a new book about her.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited,
Hello, how are
Tom
you?
Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to the royal family, and specifically the Princess of Wales. What made Kate the woman she is today? Well, the man with knowledge of that is Robert Jobson, whose new book, Catherine, Princess of Wales, comes out today and tells her full story. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. She's endeared herself to the nation incredibly successfully, really much from day one of meeting William.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think she'd probably say the first decade it was a bit up and down. There was sort of, in terms of the media calling her Weighty Katie and having certain difficulties. But I think certainly since the engagement onwards, she's been a great addition to the royal family, a real glue, actually, in the royal family, and endears herself absolutely to the people, yeah.
And one of the traits you write about as contributing to this is she's quite self-deprecating in nature. Not as grand as you might expect for a princess.
Not grand at all. I mean, she's somebody that is there to serve. She's a great advocate, I think, for children under the age of 5, mental health issues, does a terrific job with that. But also, more importantly, she's there to support the King and support her husband, the Prince of Wales, in a way that really, you know, we've not seen before for a long time. And I think that, you know, there she is when she's had this terrible diagnosis, and the way she's dealt with it has brought everybody a realisation to everybody of just how important she is to the monarchy going forward at a time of transition, at a time of change.
And that commitment to service, I mean, you started writing the book a couple of years ago, so before her diagnosis came out. Was that clearly a theme that was coming through already that has been reinforced by the way she's dealt with this awful diagnosis?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I started writing this book. I mean, Paminda Man, who's the CEO of the book company, came to me, and I went with a different idea. And she said, no, I really want to know more about Kate. She's a bit of an enigma, although she's this public figure. We don't know as much about her as, say, the previous Princess of Wales. And, of course, I looked at it and thought, well, pretty soon she will be the Princess of Wales, and that's going to be a bit of a change. And then, of course, during this period of time of writing it, you realise that just how important she is, with everything that's gone on in the royal family, with the passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth to the coronation of the King, just how important she is as somebody. You know, her children are prince and princesses. Her husband was born a prince. Her father-in-law born to be king. She, you know, her great grandfather on her mother's side was a painter and decorator. She went to school and she went to, you know, work on a double-decker bus. So she's got a real connection with the people, which is essential for this institution.
When it all comes down to it, above all else, is she a great wife and mother?
Well, I think that she puts absolutely right to put that first, and what we've seen now with the diagnosis, we wish her absolutely well, and she looked terrific, didn't she, both at Wimbledon and at Trooping the Colour, but nobody should expect her to be having to put duty first and do these things now. She's got to, I think, be allowed to, by everybody, take as much time as she wants to come back when it's ready, suits her, when she's ready to do so, and to put her family first. She's got 3 young children. And the book ultimately is out tomorrow? It's out today. Out today. Yeah. Catherine, Princess of Wales, by Robert Jobson, out today. Thanks so much for joining us. Very much appreciated. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Of course, we're going to take a quick break to end the hour, and we'll have the very latest both from Southport and from the Middle East after this short break.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. An overnight development, a 17-year-old charged with murder and attempted murder in relation to the mass stabbing here in Southport. Clashes broke out between police and protesters in Westminster last night in the wake of the Southport attack, with the Metropolitan Police saying 100 people have been arrested.
Also ahead this morning, Iran's Ayatollah leads prayers at the funeral for Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh after vowing revenge over his death. The Bank of England to announce its interest rate decision. It could be cut for the first time in 4 years. And a midweek medal fest for Team GB in Paris.
Hello and good morning to you from Southport. Our top story is that significant development, the news that people here in Southport are waking up to this morning. A 17-year-old boy charged with murder and attempted murder after the mass stabbing that happened here in Southport on Monday. 3 young girls, 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stankham and 9-year-old Elise Aguirre, dying as a result of that attack that took place at the Heartspace Community Centre, not far from where I am standing now. Well, the suspect is going to appear at Liverpool City Magistrates Court this morning. The Crown Prosecution Service and Merseyside Police giving this update late last night.
A 17-year-old boy from Banks has been charged with the murders of BB, Elsie Dot and Alice. 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article following the tragic incident in Southport on Monday, the 29th of July. The 17-year-old cannot be named for legal reasons as he is under 18. He has been remanded in custody to appear tomorrow, the Thursday, the 1st of August, at Liverpool Magistrates Court, Derby Square. Whilst these charges are a significant milestone within this investigation, this remains very much a live investigation, and we continue to work with our partners from Lancashire Police and Counter-Terrorism Policing North West. I would like to thank all the forces who've offered and supplied support to Merseyside Police during the last 3 days, and I can confirm that we are being supported with investigative resources from across the North West. Thank you.
Violent protests broke out in London and Hartlepool last night, again following misinformation that has circulated online over the course of the last few days about the attack that happened here in Southport. In London last night, the Metropolitan Police said over 100 people had been arrested. The Met saying for offences that included violent disorder, assault on an emergency worker and breach of protest conditions. Let's talk to our correspondent Ashna Hiranag, who's here with me. And Ashna, before we talk about the ugly consequences of what's been circulating online, let's focus on what's been happening behind us this morning, because people here in this community waking up to that news that happened around midnight last night, so many of them will have been asleep, but they're waking up to that news that the suspect has been charged, and just coming here again as a focal point, and you can see lots of teddy bears behind you that, well, you explain what happened, because residents doing everything they can to show what they how they care.
Yeah, we expected rain overnight, and some local residents took it upon themselves. They thought, you know what, I don't want all those teddies to get wet. They took in all of those cuddly toys and teddy bears, many of them, most striking to us, we were talking about it yesterday, there are used teddy bears from children's bedrooms, clearly those children wanting to share something with the memories of those 3 little girls who lost their lives. And local residents came in here, took them all in overnight, and in the last hour or so they've laid down a bed sheet, and viewers might be able to see on their screens, but they laid them all out. So it's a blanket that's just behind our shoulders, and it's just full, I'd say, of about 100 or so teddy bears, and it's just the most striking scene, and lots of people have been coming down to not only lay their flowers but also to take some pictures of it too.
Yeah, it might seem like such a small detail, but it means so much. It's so significant. Let's return to what happened last night. Pockets, I think we can say, pockets of protests and violent disorder around the UK. Just talk us through what we know about unfolded, because nothing happened here in Southport last night. fortunately for the residents who were really worried.
Fortunately so, and you're right, they were worried. There were some extra provisions that were brought in. Merseyside Police relying on those extra resources from Lancashire and other parts of the northwest, just preemptively, just in case something did happen. It wasn't the focus here, though. There was what many called the seeking of deep division by pockets of communities. We saw in Hartlepool, London, but also places like Aldershot and Manchester, where pockets of violence started to erupt. We're seeing pictures on our screen now. In London, you referenced it, over 100 arrests made by the Metropolitan Police, including that of violent disorder. Police in Hartlepool attacked police. They were attacked with projectiles, including glass bottles and eggs. A police car there also was set alight. Cleveland Police arresting 8 people. In Manchester, a hotel that's believed to be housing asylum seekers, there was a group of demonstrators outside there that was said to be intimidating members of the public. But let's remember, round the corner from this scene, genuinely, Sarah Jane, 5 minutes down the road, a few hundred people gathered here, made their way over to a local mosque because they had been fueled, many say, by social media speculation, fueled by online disinformation, which the police say has helped nobody. We saw such violent unrest on Tuesday night, barely 24 hours after the incident on Monday, and many people in Southport yesterday were very keen to stress these people were not from our local area. They travelled in, they poured off the trains, many people said. It simply wasn't in their name.
Let's just talk about the suspect. It is a major, significant development, charges being brought, but there is very little we can say at that stage. So perhaps you can just run me through the procedure for today. What will happen to that 17-year-old boy?
So we know at some point today that 17-year-old suspect is going to appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court, where they will face their first hearing. From there, it's very likely, because this is a significant incident, it's very likely then that case will get transferred to the Crown Court. That could happen later today. We know they're facing charges of attempted murder and murder. It could be, many people are wondering, why on earth do we not know the name of this person? Usually when we get a charge, we can reveal the name, but because this person is under 18, we are not able to reveal their name. The police would not tell us their name. It could be later down the line that is revealed, but that is for the justice system to decide.
Ashna, just behind you can't see, but you can turn around now, you finished speaking. We can see members of the local police force coming here with flowers to pay their respects. Let's just take a look at that. Ashna, we talk about the community being affected, and I was speaking to a local resident here, and we were talking about the heightened police presence in the area, and she said Southport doesn't have that many police. This is a sleepy seaside town. These police officers are known to the community. They live in the community. And we've seen the police and other first responders coming here since Monday to pay their respects much like this, because not only is this affecting them professionally, but personally as well.
Absolutely, and it's not just these police officers who are affected, but it's also the other emergency services personnel too. We saw paramedics and ambulance services members coming to pay their respects too, who got very, very emotional. So we can see now there's some of the members of the
community support team here in Southport.
Just reading some of those messages. And they're standing now, we're just observing and taking it all in.
As so many people have, Ashley, you and I have been here since Monday, and we see new faces coming to pay tribute here at this memorial that has grown over the coming days. But we also see people coming back, familiar faces turning up every day, because as this memorial grows, they feel like they have to come again. This really is a focal point, and people revisit it just to come and talk to other people about what has happened here.
It's a really powerful place to be, and we were here on Monday when this initial attack happened, and there was only a few bunches of flowers, a few bouquets, but it's now grown. It's now about 6 foot deep, and there are so many balloons, and we talked about this blanket that's been laid out full of cuddly toys, but there are candles too. And coming here in the morning, they've chosen a point to come where it's really quiet, very still. It is still a very sombre place to be. And let's just also reflect on the fact that they have had quite a hellish 48 hours. The first responders on the scene on Monday, they will be their colleagues who no doubt this will have had an impact on. But then to have the unrest on the Tuesday night, they can't catch a break. And lots of those officers would have been absolutely exhausted. We know a number of officers sustained serious injuries after that. Speaking to one woman yesterday, when there was an officer on her driveway that had clearly been injured in some way and he was bleeding, and she offered to come in from the trouble and the disorder, and he said, I don't want to put you in any danger. I need to stay here. So all they could do was give him a towel and some water. Just a word on how difficult their jobs are at the moment. And of course, all the while, the forensic work since this incident happened would have been relentless. They would have been combing through this scene, but also uncovering more about what potentially may have happened. And their job would have been so difficult.
Ashna, thank you. Ashna Hurnak. Following developments with me here in Southport this morning. That 17-year-old suspect expected at Liverpool City Magistrates Court this morning. We'll bring you updates from there as and when we can. In the meantime, I'll hand back to Wilf.
SJ, Ashna, thanks so much. Very moving footage there. And in response to the protests that Sarah Jane was talking about, particularly those protests overnight, the Prime Minister will meet senior police leaders in Downing Street this afternoon. Mari's here to talk about the political significance of this. And what's the headline reason, you think, for Keir Starmer going as far as summoning the police?
Well, I think this meeting, this round-table meeting in Downing Street today, is about, first and foremost, the Prime Minister demonstrating his support and solidarity with the police and with the emergency services. And partly it will be thanking them for everything they've done so far. We've seen not just violence on the streets of Southport, but also Hartlepool and also here in London, in Westminster, Downing Street as well. So it will be thanking them to start with and recognising their contribution. And then second of all, it's also about focusing on, yes, we have the right to protest in this country, we have the right for peaceful protest, but what people don't have the right to do is commit violence and criminality. And so he wants to speak to the police about how he wants to make sure that they use the full force of the law and any powers that they have at their disposal to kind of counteract any of the violence they might be seeing on the streets and also to prevent or crack down on kind of willful, excessive violence in the streets. I mean, we've also seen really quite incredible scenes emerging on social media from Southend this week as well. Several people, it appears to be, running around attacking each other with huge knives. And if people want to read more, there's more on the Sky News website on that as well. So there's been this kind of eruption of violence this week, and it's about a combination of thanking the police for their contribution, but also discussing with them how government can support them and making sure that they are using all the powers that they do have available.
Clearly, it's been a very big week for the Prime Minister, but also for the Home Secretary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Home Secretary went up to Southport earlier this week to pay her respects, and she's spoken a lot about this. But also, what was interesting was yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner was asked whether the Home Office and the Home Secretary might be looking at prescribing the EDL, the English Defence League, as a terrorist group. And Angela Rayner said that that was possibly being looked at by the Home Office, which was really interesting. Now, there has been some speculation, and the police have said that some of the people behind some of those riots were thought to be part of the EDL. And so it'll be interesting to see whether the government goes further by actually prescribing this group, or whether they hang back and just try and look at the facts before they do anything too hasty. But it's really fascinating that the Home Secretary might actually be even just considering it is actually quite significant.
Very big step. That would take a vote in Parliament? Or is it
not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Mark, great stuff. Thank you. Funeral proceedings are being held for Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Haniyeh was assassinated yesterday during a visit to the city. Iran has vowed revenge for his killing. And last night, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will exact a heavy price for any aggression in return in the wake of this week's events. Well, our international correspondent, John Sparks, has more for us.
With a broad smile and a fulsome handshake, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh greets officials in the Iranian parliament, here posing for pictures at the inauguration of the country's new president. One of the last things he would ever do. In the early hours, the residence of Ismail Haniyeh was hit, said the newsreader. The incident is under investigation. But it didn't take long to point the finger. Israel blamed immediately by the Iranian government and these protesters in Tehran. A protege of the organization's founder, Sheikh Yassin, Haniyeh became the leader of Hamas in 2006 and tried to push it in a political direction. Yet he was committed to armed struggle. Designated a terrorist by the Americans in 2018, the International Criminal Court also sought a warrant for his arrest. But many saw him as pragmatic, even moderate, as he tried to negotiate a ceasefire with Israel. In the West Bank, hundreds of Palestinians took to the streets in a series of noisy protests, here hoisting the green flag of Hamas. In Hebron, they held Haniyeh's picture aloft before the skirmishes began with Israeli forces. Politicians said the assassination would serve to energize the Palestinian cause. In Gaza, the news of Haniyeh's demise was greeted with dismay. Our team traveling to the place where the 62-year-old grew up, the Shati refugee camp near Gaza City. There's not much left of the neighborhood now, but those who remain proclaimed him a man of the people.
Everyone loved him because he was so humble with everyone, young and old, the father of good deeds and of forgiveness.
He was betrayed. They couldn't take him out in Gaza where he'd lived for years and years, and they never got him. They took him out when he was in a foreign country.
For the family members of the Israeli hostages seen gathering here in Jerusalem, it is an event of undeniable significance. The Israelis, it seems, have eliminated their principal counterpart when hopes of a deal were arising. Yet many see no other way. Isn't there a contradiction here? The Israeli government both trying to destroy Hamas and negotiate with them through intermediaries at the same time?
This is a good question. Terror organizations like Hamas, like Al-Qaeda, they don't really care like we care about people, about the circumstances, about real life. It doesn't have the same way of thinking like you and I. And if you don't push it, they see it as a weakness.
Hamas has recovered from similar setbacks. The death of Haniyeh will not destroy it, but it may shatter the balance in the region. The risk of escalation has never been so great.
John Sparks joins me now live from Jerusalem. John, the risk of escalation, is that particularly fueled, our assessment of it at least, by those comments from the Ayatollah?
Yeah, it certainly adds to it. I mean, you've got the death of a top Hezbollah leader in South Beirut, the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital, Tehran. I mean, I think it's left this region, it's left the Middle East on the edge, Wilfred. The Iranians have vowed revenge for the death of Haniyeh, whose funeral procession has been taking place in Tehran this morning. The supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, said, "It is our duty to avenge his blood." And it's being reported this morning that he has authorized a direct strike on Israel. So what's going on in Iran? Start with the fact that this is a major embarrassment for them. Haniyeh was in town for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. They'd put him up in a highly secure state guest house. Turns out it wasn't that secure. They couldn't protect him. So the regime now looking to re-establish its deterrence. They want to defend their sovereignty. They want the Israelis to pay a price for this. But what Israel has done is that it has shown that it can take out its enemies whenever, wherever it likes in the region. I should say that Israel has not confirmed responsibility for killing Haniya, but it is widely believed to have carried out the strike. Quick word about the negotiations for the ceasefire in Gaza. I don't think they're in a good place right now, particularly when you consider the fact that Haniya was the political leader of Hamas. Some of the main intermediaries in these negotiations, from Egypt, from Qatar, questioning whether the Israelis have a serious desire for peace in Gaza. Words from the Qatari Prime Minister Al Thani this morning: how can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side? And you've got a whole bunch of other countries, like the Chinese, like the Russians, joining in on that condemnation of the death of Haniya.
John Sparks, thanks so much. Well, meanwhile, as John alluded to, in Lebanon, funeral proceedings also taking place there for a senior Hezbollah commander killed in a blast in Beirut. Well, Israel's claimed responsibility for that attack, saying Fuad Shakur was responsible for a strike on a football pitch in the occupied Golan Heights that killed a dozen children and teenagers. Sky's special correspondent Alex Crawford has this report from Beirut.
Emergency workers are still clearing the rubble from the Israeli strike in the heart of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Bedrooms have been exposed and personal belongings are now half buried under stones and debris. Almost hidden amongst the wreckage, you can just about make out a child's Pikachu bear. The Lebanese fighting group Hezbollah, which is closely allied with Iran, confirmed that their senior commander Fuad Shakur was in the building. Military sources told us it took rescue workers a night and a day to locate the body of the fighter, who was the Hezbollah leader's right-hand man, his deputy.
This is not going to calm things, right in a densely populated civilian area as well as a Hezbollah stronghold.
Local Hezbollah leaders are furious and immediately vowed revenge.
Israel will be punished.
Okay, and how is this going to lead to a regional war?
It will be punished soon.
And is this going to lead to a regional war? Because that's what everyone is worried about.
You should be wait, just wait.
The attack on the Lebanese capital, along with another strike 12 hours later in the Iranian capital, Tehran, is being seen as incendiary, and Lebanese politicians are viewing it as an aggressive breach of sovereignty.
I think the international community has been too patient with Israel. And within Israel, people know that they need to stop the fighting and to stop the killing. And we call on them to do this now and not spend more effort and money and killing as a waste. It's a waste.
Do you worry for Lebanon now?
I worry for Lebanon. I worry for the Arab world. I worry for all of the region. I worry about an international conflict.
But along with the commander, the community of Dahiya came together in its hundreds to mourn a brother and sister also killed in the Israeli attack. Their brother is in a critical condition in hospital. Many of those present were reduced to tears. 2 women were also killed, and Lebanon's health ministry said there were more than 70 wounded. And the twin assassinations appears to have only strengthened the resolve amongst the Hezbollah faithful. Hezbollah and Hamas are inextricably linked, and in the winding lanes of one of Beirut's refugee camps, they were honouring the memory of the Hamas chief negotiator. The man talking in front of the poster of Ismail Haniyeh was a close friend of his and fellow member of the Hamas political leadership team.
We're a resistance movement that's not going away, and we have the right to a strong retaliation. But I can't say, from my political position, exactly how or on what level this retaliation will be. We'll find out in the coming days.
Hezbollah's released another chilling video showing what they claim is surveillance detail of key Israeli sites, including the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv, apparently an indication of the group's potential targets. The grieving masses in Beirut are simmering with a yearning to avenge those killed. Hamas and Hezbollah are certainly expected to respond. The key question is, what will Iran do, and how strong will any retaliation be? This region is at its most precarious point since the start of the war in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
More from the Middle East later in the show. We'll be speaking to Samuel Romani from Rusi about the latest situation there. But first, now for all of the day's other top stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you very much. Wilfred, the Bank of England might announce its first interest rate cut in 4 years today. Economists are expecting a 0.25% cut to bring rates down to 5%. We'll bring you the bank's decision live on Sky News when they announce it at around midday. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, will meet the BBC boss today, Tim Davie, after Hugh Edwards admitted to possessing indecent images of children. Yesterday, the broadcaster admitted it was aware the former newsreader was arrested in November but continued to employ him until April. Mr Edwards has pleaded guilty to having 41 indecent photographs of children. To the US now, Donald Trump has been criticised over comments he made questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris, speaking at a convention hosted by the National Association of Black Journalists. Mr. Trump questioned whether the vice president was black.
I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
While speaking at a rally in Houston last night, the Vice President had this reaction to the former president's remarks.
Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better.
We're going to have more from the US later in the day from our team there. But for now, we're going to have some breaking news on the situation surrounding the stabbing earlier this week in Southport. Let's go to our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt. Martin, we understand the 17-year-old involved was being charged or was going to be charged today. Talk us through the latest.
He was charged last night, and that was announced at a press conference at midnight at Liverpool Police, Merseyside Police HQ, announced by Chief Crown Prosecutor and the Chief Constable, Serena Kennedy. In the last few minutes, the 17-year-old, who we can't name for legal reasons because he's under 18, as a 17-year-old he is under the in the eyes of the law, a child, so he can't be named. He appeared here. He's been taken into the back of the court. It was quite an entrance. Obviously, police very conscious of the sensitivity of this crime. There were at least 8 vehicles in that convoy that sped through the waterfront here, took the 17-year-old into the back of the court. He was in a prison van. There were 2 police cars ahead of it, then a convoy of 4 vans. He was in one of those 4 vans, the prison van, surrounded by Merseyside police vans, and there were 2 cars backing it up as well. Lots of police jumped out, guarded the entrance to the back of the court. I think there were so many police here because there was an anticipation of perhaps an angry crowd, perhaps a repetition of those scenes we saw the other night in Southport. Well, I have to say there was none of that. There were a few bystanders who suddenly cottoned on, hearing those sirens, seeing those blue lights, realised perhaps what was about to happen. But there were no great drama. He's been taken into court, and in about half an hour, that 17-year-old, who we can't name, we know only that he was arrested on Monday. He's been questioned by Merseyside Police since then. He was living in the village of Banks, not far from Southport, and he's been charged with 3 murders and a number of attempted murders and possession of a knife. All of those will be outlined when he appears in court. So 3 murder charges, 10 attempted murder charges, 1 charge of possession of a knife, charged with the murders of B.B. King, Elsie Stankham and Elise Aguiar, the Portuguese girl. Those 3 among those victims who were stabbed, who have since died since that stabbing on Monday. In the next few minutes, we may hear more details about that crime and the allegations against this 17-year-old.
Martin Brunt, thanks so much. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, comedian Frank Skinner will join us to discuss his life and going on tour again and turning down Strictly Come Dancing. We'll also be talking to Luke Littler, the darts sensation. That's also still to come here on The Breakfast Show.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent and I'm based here in Beijing.
We help you understand the world with us. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, my next guest plays the ukulele for an hour a day to relax. Once said, risk takers whose risks paid off are no braver than those whose risks ended in ridicule. It's comedian Frank Skinner. 2 facts that the team have pulled out to define you there.
That's I forgot the second one completely.
It's actually very, very apt.
Well, I haven't totally worked it out yet. Have you got a pencil and paper?
So, Frank, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And it's been a very heavy news week, so particularly great timing to have you with us. And you're about to go back on stand-up tour again.
Yeah, well, I've sort of been touring this show since, well, for about a year and a half now, it must be. And I've already done the West End twice, and now I'm back again, starting on Monday, actually. I'm at the Gielgud Theatre for 3 weeks in the West End till the 24th of August. And then I go on tour again. And so I'm going to be touring and doing gigs until December now.
And is that something you celebrate and welcome, or does it get quite repetitive, exhausting?
You know what, it's great. I mean, I surprise myself because I ought to be getting sort of a bit hackneyed with it and thinking, oh, not this again. But I never feel that. Just before I go on stage, I find myself... Years ago, my partner said to me she thought I had high serotonin levels because she'd caught me watching sausages through, you know, the glass door in an oven door?
Yeah.
I was watching these sausages cooking. I was literally jumping up and down with excitement.
Just as they started to go crispy on the outside.
You know that moment where you think, here they come. Yeah. And that's what I'm like before I go on stage.
I like that. Sausages are
I'm
key.
very pre-sausage before I go on stage.
Yeah, no, and so going on, presumably the joy you must... I mean, making people laugh has got to be one of the best feelings around, and to do that in person...
Well, it's joyous. The thing is not, you know, I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said, breathing's the easiest thing in the world until you think about it. And if you actually think, I'm going to go on stage tonight and make people laugh for an hour and a half, that sounds impossible. So you have to not think about it, just go out and let it happen.
I mean, if we get things wrong on this, I guess there's two big differences. One is you can make a small error, whereas if I try and crack a joke in front of a couple of people, which I don't, thankfully, to the world, do too often, and when it falls flat, it's so humiliating. When you try and be funny and it fails. I mean, do you have moments like that, or are all your jokes very tried and tested before you take them in front of a big crowd?
At this stage in the tour, most of it is tried and tested, but I keep adding stuff all the time just to keep me interested. Because if you think that new joke's coming up in a minute, how's that going to go? It's quite exciting. But when I begin a show, I'm literally go and do an hour in a room with 80 people, and I haven't done any of it before. And that is, that can be harrowing. But if a joke goes badly, often you can get laughs about the fact that a joke has gone badly.
If you're good at thinking on your feet and adapting it, I guess. And I'm interested, I want to go on to some of your other passions in a moment, but who are some of your original comedic inspirations, and how do you think things have changed for you today compared to, I don't know how long ago we'll be talking about, but...
well, my first gig was December 1987.
And growing up, presumably you wanted to get... Not quite. I was
Close.
2.
Oh, there you go. But that's amazing. You were 2 and I was on stage.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And now here we are.
But do you think now the way that social media might get some jokes out, that, you know, comedic shows on Netflix and everything else and Sky are massive now. Do you think that the early comedians were not as celebrated as you and your peers today because of that? Or did word get around for the great comedians that inspired you?
I think the great thing was people talk about social media as if there was nothing before, but word of mouth was a very powerful thing. You know, we all knew Billy Connolly was a brilliant comedian before there was any social media. So, I don't know, I think if you're funny, news travels quite fast, which I think is the slogan of Sky News, if I remember right.
It's something like that,
yeah.
but slightly different details.
But as for inspiration, the one that sticks in my memory wasn't even a comedian. There was a wrestler called Les Kellett. This was when wrestling used to be on Saturday afternoons. And he was a sort of a comedy wrestler with a hint of menace and violence added in, which I don't use personally. But every time I saw him, the whole family would gather around and we just loved this guy. And I just remember thinking how great to make people laugh like that all the time.
Absolutely. And so there's laughter, and then there's also, I guess, intrigue, inspiration from words, from poetry. What poetry is, does it rival comedy in your eyes now? It's become a great passion for you now.
Well, I don't know if poetry produces dopamine or whatever those chemicals are that make you happy.
Sausages and...
Yeah, sausages and poetry. That's the title of my next memoir. Thanks, Wilf. It does something to me when I read poetry, and I read or listen to poetry every day. It does something to me, which is like... I tried meditation once. I don't know if you've ever meditated, but it really slows everything down. And poetry, yeah, it makes me feel... I suppose blissfully happy is the truth of it.
And the other thing in terms of interest outside of the comedy, we were reading recently that you've been invited onto Strictly many times?
Yes, I've always said no.
Always said no, but not because of some of the recent issues that are out there?
No, I'm not frightened of being knocked around so much as being humiliated. I've never been able to dance. I hate dancing. I don't know, but I think you might be a kindred spirit on this, Wilf. When I'm on a dance floor, I feel...
Are you saying I don't look like a natural master of rhythm?
I can't see
and
you.
Coordination? Because if you are,
I'll be looking
spot on.
Well, I'm the same.
Worse still for me is I'm 6'5", so everyone can see how terrible I am on a dance floor, which is humiliating.
Yeah, but also I'm the older guy, and the older guy on Strictly is always the one that is, you know, the humiliated one. So I'd be dressed as a giant grouse dancing to George Ezra's Shotgun.
Well,
I mean, be, you know, awful.
One of the many joys of recently having had a son is now I can at least carry the label of dancing like a dad, and telling jokes like a dad.
Yeah, exactly. You were just waiting to... You were a dad in waiting.
Waiting for that tag to come along. Well, a man who tells jokes like an absolute true master, of course, is Frank Skinner, and you're back at the...
At the Gielgud Theatre, starting Monday for 3 weeks.
There we go.
This Monday.
Pleasure talking with you, Frank, as always.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So to come on the Breakfast Show, we will be talking to Luke Littler to discuss his remarkable rise and whether or not darts should join the Olympics. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've got some breaking news now. Sir Paul Marshall, the hedge fund tycoon and GB News shareholder, is closing in on a deal to buy The Spectator magazine. That big scoop, of course, coming from our city editor, Mark Kleiman, who joins me now. So, Mark, tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, that's right, Wilf. Sir Paul Marshall, well-known figure in the City of London, made a huge fortune from his hedge fund firm Marshall Wace. He's now a big shareholder in GB News, as you said. He's been linked with the auction of The Spectator and the Daily and Sunday Telegraph newspapers for the last year or so. What I understand this morning is that he's now closing in on a deal to buy The Spectator only, and that's a deal that would cost him probably tens of millions of pounds. My sources say between 50 and 100 million pounds, and that will be separate from the auction of the Daily Telegraph. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Sir Paul won't also try to acquire the Telegraph newspapers, but this deal that I'm hearing about this morning purely relates to The Spectator.
And for all of the reporting and talk about what might happen to this group of titles, a lot of it is rested on, well, could that person or that consortium get the money together? If it's just The Spectator, Paul Marshall can presumably afford that on his own?
He absolutely can. I mean, he's one of Britain's wealthiest individuals, and he could easily finance a bid for The Spectator on his own. I mean, it's worth just recapping, Wilf, that we're here because just over a year ago, The Spectator and the Telegraph newspapers' parent companies were put into administration by Lloyds Banking Group. They'd been owned for the best part of 20 years by the Barclay family, who had run into financial difficulties. And as a result of that auction, an Abu Dhabi state-backed vehicle called Redbird IMI came forward, repaid the debt that the Barclay family owed to Lloyds, and put itself into pole position to acquire ownership of these titles. And that created a furious backlash, particularly from Conservative politicians who objected to foreign state ownership of the titles. The last government then changed media ownership laws in a real hurry to prevent the deal going through. And now it's Redbird IMI, which is managing the onward sale of these assets. The sale of the Telegraph will be completed later this year. There are other bidders in contention for that, including a consortium, if he can get the money together, led by Nadeem Zahawi, the former Chancellor. David Montgomery, a well-known newspaper industry figure, is also bidding. The fate of the Telegraph remains up in the air, but it does seem likely to me this morning that Sir Paul Marshall could acquire The Spectator magazine, one of Britain's most influential political magazines, as soon as this month.
In terms of separating out, obviously the Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph would be sold together. Separating that out from The Spectator, that's purely a decision that the sellers will just want to maximise revenue?
Yeah, exactly right. The Spectator is a less politically contentious process to go through because The Spectator's ownership was not subject to the statutory instruments that were rushed through Parliament a few months back by the last Conservative government. The Spectator's ownership is therefore less subject to political intervention. That deal could happen as soon as the next few weeks.
One person who was also massively against the sort of foreign state takeover was the chairman of The Spectator, Andrew Neil.
That's right.
What's his relationship like with Sir Paul Marshall? Because he was obviously there at the founding of GB News, but left abruptly.
That's right. He left in slightly fraught circumstances, didn't he? Andrew Neil, who has indicated that he would step down as chairman of The Spectator to hand over to what he describes as the next generation a few months ago. He's still in place at the moment, but he had indicated that he would step down. Now, when the issue of the Abu Dhabi ownership was still up for debate, Mr Neil said very vocally that he opposed ownership of the titles by Abu Dhabi, but he also said that he had a personal preference that Sir Paul Marshall did not take ownership of The Spectator as well. Now, whether he's changed his mind in the last few months is unclear, but certainly you would expect that if Sir Paul does end up buying The Spectator magazine, Andrew Neil will be leaving his position relatively promptly.
Mark, great scoop as always. Thanks so much. Time now to focus on the Olympics. Day 6 in Paris. Medals up for grabs again for Team GB rowing and swimming. The focus today, and Team GB will be hoping to keep up the momentum, of course. A day of great success yesterday. 5 medals picked up across the games for Team GB. If we have a quick look at the tables, China top currently. They've got, well, it says 9 gold medals, but it looks like 10 on the standings chart. France and Japan following with 8. Team GB coming in with 6 golds, a little bit lower down on the list. Let's get out to Rachel Venables. She's at Fulham Reach Boat Club for us today and previewing some of the upcoming rowing events today. And after success yesterday, hopefully more success to come.
Absolutely. It was a phenomenal day with that picture-perfect finish for those women, for the quad in the women's racing yesterday. And we've got two more really exciting races, particularly coming up actually in the next 20 minutes or so over in Paris with the women's and the men's 4. And I'm on the beautiful Thames this morning trying to have a chat with this woman who's just gone past us now, Vicky Thornley, Rio silver medalist, of course. Thank you so much for joining us out. You've been enjoying a spot of the beautiful conditions here, calm conditions at Fulham Reach Boat Club this morning. Talk to me about the races that are taking place in the next, 10, 15 minutes or so over in Paris. How hopeful are you?
Yeah, we've got the women's double, the women's 4 and the men's 4, so all medal hopefuls. Yeah, obviously they've got to bring their A game today. It's the biggest race of obviously the week for them and of the last 3 years. So yeah, I think we're on for some good medals today, hopefully.
And you're obviously out on the water here enjoying these beautiful conditions at Fulham Reach Boat Club, which I know is putting on a really spectacular set of events for children locally, people on free school meals, children from state schools, trying to get everyone involved. Talk to me about how important these kind of more grassroots organisations are when it comes to your sport, the sport you love.
Yeah, Fulham Reach is an incredible example of it. They're partnering with schools in the local area, and kids that wouldn't normally have the chance to have a go at rowing, they're getting the opportunity here. So you never know, there could be some future Olympians at this rowing club, and yeah, they're just getting the opportunity. Also, predominantly funded by the National Lottery. So it's about the players who play the National Lottery every week. Like, thank you, because you're giving these kids opportunity to get into a brilliant sport like rowing, like lots of sports across the UK. So I think it's really important that they support the grassroots, and then obviously as well, the National Lottery supports all the athletes out there competing for medals today in Paris.
Amazing. Well, listen, Vicky Thornley, thank you so much. Rio silver medalist in the double sculls. I'm going to let you get back onto the water and keep enjoying yourself as we, of course, turn our attention over to Paris. I know certainly in the boat club itself, they will have the screens on, and the youngsters who are taking part here will very much be enjoying watching particularly our 3 GB teams who we really have high hopes for winning that gold medal and bringing it home.
Rachel, great stuff there. And I have to say, fantastic interview, absolutely loved it. But you're revealing there that you're in a motorised boat as opposed to getting the oars out and rowing yourself, which is a slight shame. But fantastic coverage throughout the morning there from Rachel at Fulham Boat Clubs in West London. I had the rowing today. We are going to talk now to darts sensation Luke Littler, who went from teenage unknown to Luke the Nuke in less than a year. When he burst onto the scene, he's now leading a group of stars hoping to inspire Brits to experience live sport as part of a new series of free audio guides. Luke, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And so Luke, talk us through this new audio guide. Is what, to try and inspire more people to get involved in darts themselves, or to watch darts on telly or in person?
I think for the audience, it's better to get out there and actually witness the atmosphere in person, because I know some of them will probably say it's good on TV, but once you're actually in any venue, it's always a good atmosphere for the darts.
Of course, since the darts is usually on Sky Sports, we'll also say that it's well worth watching on TV if you can't make it there in person. What is the atmosphere like, and how have you felt over the last year as you've become such a superstar of the sport? Does it urge you on, or can it be distracting?
I would prefer playing in front of fans, put on a show for them. They're the ones who pay the money. They're the ones who travel to watch us. So I'd like to play on stage rather than behind closed doors, which is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, we appreciate you taking a bit of time, though, to talk to us. What about yourself as a sports fan? Are there other sports you love going to watch when you've got downtime?
I'll always try and get to the Manchester United games whenever I'm available. I got invited to the UFC just gone, seen loads of fights there, and that's it. And also my local rugby team, Warrington Wolves.
Are you watching much of the Olympics, and do you think that darts could and should be part of the Olympics at some point in the future?
I've got to be honest, I've not really watched any of the Olympics. I don't really know if it should be in the Olympics. Maybe if you ask some of the older guys, they might have an idea of it.
Would you like to be in a position though where it's representing Team GB if that ever came about? Is that something that would inspire you even more?
I think representing Team GB in any would be good. But obviously the main one for me at the minute is trying to get in the rankings and try and play for the World Cup team.
And I guess just finally, Luke, in terms of this extraordinary roller coaster ride that you've had over the last 12 to 18 months, has any of it settled in? Have you had any moments of sort of disappointment when you've been between tournaments or a particular tournament hasn't gone as well? Do the huge highs get followed by some lows at all, or has it just been a joy to be on that roller coaster ride?
Obviously, dart players have the low times. Obviously, I went out in the first round of the match play, but I said yesterday the fans were good. I was a bit nervous, but if there is bad times, then I know there's competition almost every weekend, so I'll just pick up my darts again and just go again in the next tournament.
Luke Littler, a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now to finish off, Artie Nachipan's here to talk about some new research that's come out about smartphones and the way it might be affecting youngsters, linking it to some possible downsides, too much use.
Yes, so what this study looked at is problematic smartphone use. So it's not as extreme as addiction, but it does have some similar tendencies. So when it comes to not being able to manage the time you spend on your phone, using it to the detriment of other meaningful activities, or panicking when you're away from it. And what these researchers found from studying two groups of teenagers, 16 to 18 and 13 to 16, is that teenagers who had problematic smartphone use were twice as likely to report symptoms of anxiety and also were more likely to suffer from depression and insomnia. And they had a look at some of the strategies that were effective in tackling this. And it's things that are simple as putting your phone in another room when you go to bed, or turning off notifications on your phone. But I think what is interesting is it's not as simple as screen time versus not being on your screen. It's actually your relationship with your phone beyond the amount of time you spend on your screen, because it all comes down to what you do on your screen and how that affects you.
And no doubt the research said that time spent on the Sky News app is unreservedly a positive at all
No
times.
comment.
Artie, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. That does it for Sky News Breakfast today. Thanks so much for watching. Sarah Jane and Gareth will have all the top stories after this short break.
This is Sky News Today. It is 10 o'clock, live from Southport. Tight security as the man charged over the murders of 3 young girls who lost their lives here on Monday is brought to court. Keep dancing, a message of support from the police to the families and friends struggling to comprehend the tragedy that has hit this community. Later today, the Prime Minister will hold talks in Downing Street with the country's police chiefs to address concern over further unrest following the attack.
Also to come this morning, to cut or to hold, the Bank of England to announce its latest interest rate decision at midday, amid speculation it could be lowered for the first time in 4 years. Iran's supreme leader reportedly orders a direct strike on Israel as the funeral is held for the Hamas political chief killed in Tehran. And the BBC boss is called in, Tim Davie, to face questions from the Culture Secretary over what the broadcasting knew about Hugh Edwards. Plus, Donald Trump steps into a storm, the former president criticised for questioning the racial identity of his White House rival.
Hello and good morning to you, live from Southport, where within the last half an hour, under tight security, the teenager charged over the murders of 3 young girls has been brought to court in Liverpool this morning. The 17-year-old arrived a short time ago, his prison van surrounded by a number of police vans as it travelled onto the court property. The teenager also accused of 10 counts of attempted murder following the tragedy that unfolded here on Monday afternoon. The 3 young girls, 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stankham, Bibi King, who was 6, and 9-year-old Elise Aguirre, died as a result of the attack that took place at the Heartspace Community Centre during a dance workshop. The Crown Prosecution Service and Merseyside Police gave this update on the suspect.
A 17-year-old boy from Banks has been charged with the murders of Bibi, Elsie Dot and Alice. 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article following the tragic incident in Southport on Monday, the 29th of July. The 17-year-old cannot be named for legal reasons as he is under 18. I would like to thank all the forces who've offered and supplied support to Merseyside Police during the last 3 days. And I can confirm that we are being supported with investigative resources from across the North West.
Well, let's go straight to Liverpool Magistrates Court and speak to our crime correspondent Martin Brunt, who's following events there. And Martin, the suspect in the building behind you, talk to me about the procedure that will be being followed right now.
There are likely to be 2 court appearances today. Firstly, in the Magistrates Court, the first appearance for the 17-year-old. We're not quite sure what's going to happen. These first appearances tend to be quite formal, and nothing much is likely to emerge from it. Certainly nothing much that's reportable. We've already said, and as you heard last night's press conference, we cannot identify the 17-year-old boy who's been charged with 3 murders and 10 attempted murders simply because of his age. He's 17. He is, according to the law, a child, so can't be named for that reason. It's unlikely that he'll be asked whether he wants to plead guilty or not guilty to those charges. So that's likely what's going to happen in the Magistrates Court. There might be some detail given about the allegations against him. If they are, it's highly likely that those 2 won't be reportable. The second court appearance, which may also be today, is the whole thing will move to the Crown Court, and that again is a formality. That is an opportunity for him to ask for bail if he wants to, but for all bail matters otherwise to be dealt with by a more senior judge. He appears firstly in front of a district judge, what we used to call magistrates, James Hatton in the lower court, and then because these courts are in the same building, given the sensitivity and the high profile nature of this operation, and you've seen the huge police operation around his arrival, I think it's likely that both these court appearances will be dealt with today. There is quite a heavy police presence. There were 8 vehicles, at least I counted, on that arrival. Police anticipating potential, at least, for an angry crowd. There wasn't anything like that. A few bystanders turned up just as the van was arriving at the back of the court, but I think they were there simply because they'd seen the police activity, the blue lights, they've heard the sirens. There were no angry shouts, nothing like that, but I think police will still be conscious that as this morning goes on and news filters through that this appearance is happening, I think they are still likely to be braced for the possibility, perhaps, of crowds assembling here just to find out what's happening with this 17-year-old.
Martin, thank you. Martin Brunt, our crime correspondent in Liverpool, for us this morning. Well, here in Southport, it remained calm last night. However, protests about what happened here this week were seen once again in other parts of the country. In London last night, the Metropolitan Police said over 100 people were arrested for offences that included violent disorder, assault on an emergency worker and breach of protest conditions. Flares were thrown towards the gates of Downing Street, and some amongst the crowd threw cans and glass bottles. Similar scenes last night in Hartlepool, County Durham. This unfolding in the early hours of this morning. A police car was set alight. 8 people arrested there, and a number of police officers, we understand, were injured. Well, here in Southport, earlier this morning, police were laying flowers as tributes to the 3 little girls continue.